Happy Sunday, SMITE fans, and welcome back to the final day of the SMITE Summer Masters event, $200,000 land, brought to you by our good friends over at Prime Gaming. Make sure you make the most of your Prime membership by linking that over to your Twitch account. You get not only free music, movies, shipping, and more with your Prime membership, but with Prime Gaming, you get free games, free content in the games you are already probably playing, as well as a free Twitch subscription to your favorite streamer. And with those free games, they rotate out every single month. So it's a whole new catalog of games. Thank you so much for Prime Gaming for being the title sponsor of Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League. I'm J-Mac. I got Dulcin and Gore joining me on the desk for our first set of the day. As I said, it is Championship Sunday. We got our third place match. We've also got our grand finals that's going to be coming up a little bit later. But before we get into all of that discussion, if you were up a little bit late last night, you may have seen some rumblings over on Twitter. But guys, we've lost the solo laner in the SPL. It's not for any of the teams today. But Yarkor on the Atlantis Leviathans will no longer be Yarkor for the Atlantis Leviathans. A tweet went out last night that says that Yarkor will no longer be playing as the solo laner for this team. Unknown where he's going to be going at the moment, and currently unknown what player is going to be taking his spot so far, Dave.
I think that they said that it was going to be. Well, yeah, I'm taking your spot anyway. I forgot that there's 3 people here for a second.
Yeah,
I think he did say as well, like, it was this weird area for him because, like, if he can't find a team, then it's like, oh, what does he do? Like, this is his job, right? So, like, if he can't find it, he'd have to go back to Colombia.
And what we saw from Shinto was the reasoning, right? Nothing performance-based, because that was the first thing that came to my mind. I was like, look, that Leviathans nearly beat the Kings, like the #1 seed in this tournament. The Leviathans were 1 game away from progressing on to the semifinals. Like, is this a big performance-based thing? No, it's an in-game or potentially out-of-game communication issue between Yarkor and the rest of the team. And so this is a massive shakeup as far as the league goes. We don't know who is going to be jumping over to the Leviathans just yet. We don't know if we're speculating. There's 2 ways this could go, and it's almost exactly what happened with, say, the Scarabs and the Dragons recently, where 2 teams could potentially just swap solo laners. If one SPL team loses their solo to the Leviathans, Yarkor could just then get picked up, or potentially some SEC talent that could get picked up.
And that's the thing. I was talking to one of my friends last night, and it's that weird thing where it's like, there's this conversation where communication and like personality clashes, like, yes, you've got to rectify those, but like, how many people out there match Hardcore's in-game presence, right? Like, how many are going to play? And that's exactly, so it's like, and so if you look at Fine, okay, he's not leaving the Dragons. Variety's not going to leave the Kings. Not going to lose Nika. It just feels like, I was going to say, most of the top 4 teams that we're going to see today, you're not getting any of them, so it feels like it's going to be interesting to see where they get the trade. I will say, and I said this only because I saw it was out there, Ducky doesn't have a team.
True.
And I like Ducky, man. I mean, he hasn't been, look, competitive history-wise, maybe there's not a lot of success there, but it doesn't mean I don't like Ducky.
My man has spent a lot of time getting yoked in the gym, so
and now he's yoked in-game too. That's what's going to happen.
Well. Yeah, I don't know. I'm excited to see how that one branches out, because again, if it ends up being an SPL for SPL swap, one team is getting a really good. Well, 2 teams, I guess, in theory, would be getting a really good solo laner. You could do a lot worse than the world's MVP in Yarkor as long as he's meshing with your squad.
Definitely so. So, at the moment, unknown exactly where Yarkor is going to be landing, unsure exactly who's going to be taking Yarkor's spot. Only time will tell. Now's the perfect time to do so, because we're going to have a few weeks of downtime before Phase 3, and then Phase 3 kicks off, and then it's Worlds after that. So, a big grind for whoever's going to be joining over on that team. But jumping back into SMITE Masters, today is the grand finals and the 3rd place match. We'll be starting with the 3rd place match. Tartarus Titans and the Oni Warriors, after their losses yesterday to the Camelot Kings and the Jade Dragons respectively, will be our first match of the day, best of 3. And then the Camelot Kings and Jade Dragons will be our grand finals, best of 5 match to determine who is going to be coming out on top to be your Phase 2 champions, your SMITE Summer Masters champion. That should be an amazing match to watch. This first one should also be a great one, just to see the clashing of these 2 teams. This kind of revitalized Oni Warriors team. They were struggling in weeks 6 through 8 of the SPL, really having a hard time finding some of those key wins, putting up a really strong fight against the Jade Dragons, 2-0ing the Olympus Bolts earlier in the week for the Oni Warriors, and the Tartarus Titans, who again, kind of maybe opposite of the Warriors, where they were struggling in kind of the first half of the phase and kind of in the middle portion. Then they started coming up on the rise as well. So taking a look at the bracket to see the journey that these 2 teams made through Tartarus Titans got their 2-1 over the Valks. Camelot Kings then knocked them down into the lower bracket. Oni Warriors 2-0 over the Bolts, and then get knocked down by the Jade Dragons, and now that's where we have our respective third-place teams.
And I think this bracket has effectively progressed as I would have assumed it would. You know, Camelot Kings, figured to see them in the finals. Jade Dragons, the way they've been looking since adding Scream to this team. If I had to put money on it, I would have seen these two teams match up in the finals. I think the only set that made me raise my eyebrows a bit, potentially the Olympus Bolts and the Oni Warriors. But, you know, the Bolts had such a successful phase, but they have always struggled at some of these tournament events. And so that one may have ended up being the toss-up quarterfinal for me.
Yeah.
But the rest of it is pretty much filled out how I expected it to.
The thing I'm really interested in regards to a lot of these teams has been like the Dragons win streak. Again, like they lost that one game against Hex Mambo, but like, and I expect they're not going to come unscathed out of a finals. Right? Like, you gotta get hit somewhere in there. But I also think that there's something to be said about the fact that they are continually pushing themselves. I think to a really comfortable spot. I mean, they were coming into this week 5 sets in a row with a win, 6, 7. They could get 8 here, and at that point, since we franchised the league, that's tied for the longest that we've seen any of these teams go. So they're really making a run for their money. If they can win this set and then continue that kind of good luck and prosperity into Phase 3, and admittedly a little over a month, I believe, after this event, like if they can kind of keep that going for them, they're going to be on a hot hand going towards the end of the year.
Yeah, I think so.
And as we jump into our first matchup of the day, the Tartarus Titans versus the Oni Warriors. Like we said, these are the two teams that got knocked out during yesterday's semifinals. A 5-game set for the Titans, a 4-game set for the Oni Warriors. And talking about the Tartarus Titans, how I kind of mentioned where this is a team, they came out hot from Masters 1, won out on that one, then kind of went through, I don't necessarily want to say an identity crisis. You know, the double, triple Hunter comp stopped working, so they started doing some other weird things where it was Cyclone playing Warriors and duo lane, and then that stopped working, or it never really got working for a while. Maybe you took a game here and there. But now that they're going back on these more traditional style of compositions and plays for the Tartarus Titans, Dave, it really does feel like the Titans have been on an upsurge.
Yeah, you know, in the same way a lot of adults will go through like a midlife crisis, I think the Tartarus Titans went through their mid-season crisis. They bought the sports car, and then they got into a crash with the sports car and decided we're gonna return it back to the dealership, and we're gonna get back to the nice, comfortable, safe, compositional minivan that we've been driving
extra
around all year. That's right,
yeah.
extra airbags, all of that. And it's looked great for the Tartarus Titans. And I've loved the resurgence I've seen from Paul specifically, I think, because there was a stretch of games there where, you know, again, we're talking about the Titans kind of plugging and choosing different types of comps, but I didn't think playing around Paul, you know, one of the best mid laners in the world, nearly enough. And as of late, was the Hell, the Merlin, some of these more carry-style mid laners rather than facilitator-style mid laners have looked so good for this Titans team. I think the mid lane battle in this matchup becomes super unique. We saw Dardez play some Morrigan. I think Paul on the Morrigan today could absolutely be a viable option. And so, Gore, I think mid lane battle becomes super unique, but obviously across the map, the Titans and the Warriors have plenty of good matchups.
I'm actually really excited for SoloOrTroll and Nika playing against each other. I guess with solo laners on the mind, maybe that's what it is coming into today, is just looking at that. Because, again, I think SoloOrTroll, you know, a lot of these clips, even though they haven't been of him, you'll see, I've seen a lot of, like, hey, there's the King Arthur. Hey, here's a Cullen. Hey, here's the Warriors everybody else is playing. And then you get to this one where it's like, oh, by the way, he's playing the Uller again. And yesterday, when he pulled that out against the Kings, it was phenomenal. It looked so good. And I'm just excited to see if he's going to either A, bring something like that out one more time, because it feels like he's one of the few people who is playing that. It's still in solo lane and is playing it as well. Shows that the Titans can get hyper-aggressive if they really want to, while also not necessarily giving anything away, because he does still kind of play it in the exact same style that he plays everything else.
Yeah, but we also kind of saw the downside of it. Is they brought it out once, it dominated against the Kings in Game 2, and then they tried to play it again in Game 3, and it kind of just got rolled. It feels like it's definitely one of those picks that can still be a surprise factor when you bring it out every once in a while, but once you bring it out for your first time, you get the win. Might be time to shelf it after that because, hey, you got that surprise win out there. Now teams know what to expect, especially in that third game. You saw top 3 picks were all 3 of those Hunters, so it's not like they were trying to hide the fact they wanted to run that strat back. And now up against the Oni Warriors, a team that has kind of been back up on the rise, had a little bit of a struggle against the Dragons during their bracket matchup during week 1 of Masters, but since then, found a 2-0 against the Olympus Bolts, able to find success over there. Went to 4 games against the Dragons yesterday, so the Oni Warriors definitely a team to keep your eyes on, and maybe trying to keep that over into the solo lane. Nika really picking up this Lancelot quite a bit. You know, this has kind of become the carry style of solo laner, maybe not quite the Uller level of carry, but has definitely been running a lot of games, Dave.
Yeah, Nika took it to Fino K a couple of times yesterday, and Fino's been playing like one of the best solo laners in the league as of late, and so I think that's a great look for the Oni Warriors. I also think the Oni Warriors, I mean, if you're zooming out and just looking at this team, they leave their set yesterday, obviously disappointed that they don't progress to the finals, but I've actually seen nothing but positivity surrounding the Oni Warriors and from their fans and online and what people are talking about this team. You'd love to finish third at Masters. You had a really high early seeding early on this year, and in Phase 2 you looked pretty good at the beginning part. And so I think the Oni Warriors feeling good about where they drop out. Some winnable games yesterday, and I think a team that has figured out a lot of their problems. And Gore, I think it's about getting back to consistency for this team, but also riding that high. I think a nice way to end the phase here would be a nice third-place win for this team. But I think there's a lot of hope in the Oni Warriors camp for good placements later on in the year.
I think, I think you're right. And honestly, I'm excited to see what they have to play out today, because I think we got to see a little bit of it yesterday, like the Morrigan combinations with things like the Hunbats and you know, maybe some balancing with some of the other matchups that they've had. The thing I'm most excited about right now, and this is very, very hyper-specific to only the Oni Warriors, and is that at the near end of this reel, we're going to get to see Qvo's Hunbats play, where he teleports in and gets that insane kill again. Did you see Kiermy's tweet? I did not. What did he say?
Kiermy was like, I was going out to collect my mail, and I can hear QvoFred.
I heard that one. That was so good.
Like screaming.
I saw
which is just so funny.
And PBM, his partner, had tweeted out something like, if you were wondering what like in-game comms sound like,
right?
And it's just like Mike yelling in the background. Look, you gotta get hype, and some of these plays are genuinely hype, right? It's a lot of good excitement for them. I think the Warriors have had I would argue this is a successful event for them, even if they get 4th here. I think that's something like, look, there were, 16 teams, 20 teams, something like that came through. Maybe less than that. Math is hard really fast. But the fact that they were able to come in, make some, I think, very important strides. Crazy plays like this one, where like a monkey teleport off of a minion gets you in just the right area to get a kill. Things like that where Qvo's just nuts. I think that you've been able to showcase that, yes, you can get it together in a good spot. And yeah, it might not be the finals, but like I said this on the desk yesterday at one point, where it's like, if you come in second, but you're second over all of these other teams, is it really that bad? Like, yes, you didn't win, and in the moment it's going to feel awful. But like a week later, it's not surprising to see like these runner-up teams or teams here, I think in the 3rd, 4th match, say, you know what? I think if we can stick to it and grind a little bit, we're going to be able to get there. And I think that's where the Warriors are at, is that if they can get that consistency and can capture that magic, then we're going to see them find a lot more success. And honestly, losing here in Masters might be better, so they can have that fire under them for Phase 3 and for Worlds.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, I think so. And with the Oni Warriors, finding even a win in this one would probably be a nice boost to their confidence. Because remember, they were 3rd place before they went on their losing streak. They were right below the Olympus Bolts. They were right below the Camelot Kings. And then a couple of bad losses here, a couple of bad losses there, drops them down to 5th, 6th seed. So now being able to at least make it to this 3rd place, kind of reprise where they were at the start of the phase, got to feel good for this team. Tartarus Titans have kind of been sitting at that 3rd, 4th place this entire time. So now we get to see which team's going to come out on top, at least for game number 1. Picks and bans ready to go between the Tartarus Titans and the Oni Warriors, with Tartarus Titans up in that very 1st place spot. A nice and bright look at NeilMah, though he's not looking as nice and bright. He's definitely in that. I'm in that. I need my first cup of coffee mood. Don't talk to me. And at least for the Tartarus Titans, one thing that's been working very well for the Warriors has been this Poseidon. That's going to be taken away right away, Gore.
Yeah, and I like that, right? Vote has just been a nuisance on this pick. I think that it makes sense to try and ban it out. And it's that weird thing where, like, when Poseidon has been up, Vote is going to play it. Like, it's never going mid. It's going to the duo lane. Their goal isn't necessarily kill pressure in the duo lane. It's like, cool, I'm going to out-farm you because I'm a mage, and then eventually I'm going to have a Kraken. And that's pretty much what he does, and I can rotate real quick. So I like that that's like the approach the Titans have to this one. Try and take care of that. It also means that you're forcing some control out of it. They can still go for like double Hunter. That's another thing that we've seen the Warriors do. But it's definitely going to be a little more limiting over in the duo lane for Vote.
For sure, and with the first wave of bans now through Poseidon,
jousting match
Dachi, and
beckons for a champion.
Muzen Cobb. I almost said Dardez, but it's a Dardez ban with the Muzen Cobb. And then Cabrakan, Iset, and Hell on the opposite side for the Oni Warriors. So putting a lot of focus, kind of spreading out the bans for the Tartarus Titans on all roles and gods that have worked for all of those specific players. And then that leaves open Lancelot and King Arthur to be first pickups here, Dave.
I think that's maybe the best way to go about banning out the Tartarus Titans, because we have seen teams in the past like throw 5 bans at Paul, and that just leaves open some of your other carries, and it is so difficult to make that style of banning work. So I don't disagree with spreading out the bans. You give a couple towards Paul, Cabrakan taken off the table as well. And a really nice one too from the Oni Warriors here. I think King Arthur for Nika, carry style of pick, yes. And I think the eyebrows have to be raised, potentially looking for something like a Hunbats later on in this draft, because that is where the Oni Warriors caught some fire earlier on yesterday. Was Morrigan plus Hunbats, and if you can get QvoFred spun up early in this set and keep those wheels turning, Oni Warriors might be on easy street.
And I think it's really fun because it works as, I guess, like a 4th ban in a way, but also like Dardez and Paul have some very, like, some overlapping gods, some not overlapping gods. Like Dardez will play weird things like the Hera every now and then, but I see the Morrigan over there, and I'm really excited to see that because, like you said, in conjunction when you have a King Arthur. If I'm looking at the other side, now I see an Olorun and a Lancelot. I'm really excited about those. But that plus whatever Cuvo gets, it just feels like no matter what, the Warriors get to come together and have just a better team fight because of it. I wouldn't be surprised, I guess, if this is like a Ymir, like, I'm banning things like the Hunbats. Like, I'm banning things that are going to be Cuvo specific here if I'm the Titans, because otherwise I think you're just going to deal with 2 of them.
So Ymir, the final pick for the Oni Warriors before we jump into the second wave of bans. And it's so strange to have seen how the meta has developed in the support role specifically. I mean, we go back to the very beginning of Masters. We go to SPL week 7 and 8, and Yemoja, Khepri. Those are the top picks that are getting grabbed immediately. And now we are all the way to second wave of bans, seeing Khepri being banned away. Yemoja at the moment being ignored. Xing has been completely thrown out the window entirely. Instead, we're seeing Ratatoskr, Nemesis, Hunbats, so 3 jungle bans, and I guess a solo lane if you throw the Ratatoskr along as a flex ban there. Between these two teams, Oni Warriors, now they got to figure out what they're going to be doing for QvoFred because that Hunbats is taken away, and they might just be waiting to see what that counter pick is because Rama is currently being hovered, and that's not at all the hunter that I'd be expecting. I mean, Cupid is up, Chernobog still hasn't been picked up, he's been kind of largely left alone. Gore, how do you feel about this Rama pick for the Warriors?
Well, okay, so we were actually talking about this with a tier list of like gods that were like fun to cast, and Ram is very high on that list for me there because he's flashy and it's always been fun to watch like Ram snipes. If you're talking about in like kind of just what he brings. He can do well in boxing matches. He's got decent-ish safety, nowhere near the level of some of the hunters we've been seeing, though, like your Heimdalls, as well as your Qingweis, things like that. But he's got good damage. He's got solo potential. You know, if Fields of Love get dropped, you just go up in the air, wait it out. It'll pop. You can come down. You get some damage out in the meantime. Again, steal potential maybe around some stuff. As far as the builds go lately, though, I feel like he's in a good spot as well. Like again, like maybe god-wise, like thinking about his scaling and numbers and like him personally, things aren't going too well. But like when Silver Branch is there and you've got an attack stem that immediately comes to my mind with the way the builds have been going, it feels like he can hit pretty hard. And so I expect good things from him. It's just kind of out of left field.
I love the way the Titans have finished off their draft here. Yeah, Ganesh too. High percentage win rate gods between Ganesh and Tier. But I look at beads burning now for the Tartarus Titans because so much of that is important with the Sanctified Field. You got Fields of Love, which is great for starting off team fights, initiating. But then you've got layers, presumably on this Lancelot, to do some of that as well. Fields of Love, these big no-play areas for the Titans, potentially so easy to execute on. And depending on how you layer them, for lack of a better word, you can really stagger out the beads of the Oni Warriors here. Fields of Love can burn some. That opens things up for Sanctified Field. Dharmic Pillars can push the Oni Warriors in certain directions. All the while, you've got a Tier, presumably somewhere in your backline, fearlessing your carries. I think the Tartarus Titans have a really nice beads burning composition built out here. About the Oni Warriors, it's communication, right? That's where we saw the Solar Scarabs fall short against this Tier. Tier was in the backline and nobody was communicating. and it was just living free and on Stu, and it just made life difficult for Baronic. And so this is a communication check now for the Oni Warriors. Can we shred down this tier? Because remember, we saw Variety play tier, and it didn't look great because their opponents were able to say, all right, we're just going to turn and burn the tier and then fight the rest of the team fight. So I think communication check for the Oni Warriors.
And that makes me want to live in a world, and it's only going to last for about
you
30
do live
seconds.
in a world. Oh, okay.
Well, because this is not going to be what happens. But I'm going to posit the theory of tier jungle just because
I was
really
literally
going to
say the same thing to you.
And like I said, it's only going to exist for 30
My
seconds.
point
so
stands regardless of
what's going to
where the
happen
map
is we're
goes.
going to load in, and it's Sot playing tier, and the Lancelot's going to layers.
Yep.
But I like the idea. Like, again, like if you're either of those, I think no matter who you're picking it for, has to change some of the build. I think if you go for that standard move speed build, it's a lot of health. Rom just picks up chin size and says, cool, man, I'm going to kill you, and that's how these fights are going to go every single time, like, without a doubt. And not only that, but he's got cripple arrows, so if timed right, if you react well enough, you can just stop the Fearless in the middle of it. So there's definitely a lot of play, I think, around there. Like you said, Dave, going into the late game, it makes that shred potential, I think, a little dangerous for him. So I want to see maybe a change up in terms of how his build goes. I'm also really curious because Cupid and Olorun, normally we see Hunter plus Olorun long lane. I still feel like that's where it could be. Olorun, like if you're in mid as Olorun, most of the time on cooldown, your beads and your ult are getting used because there's just so much foot traffic that is coming through that lane that you have to deal with it. But Cupid feels like it would probably be a better mid laner. We've seen him a lot in the long lane. It just feels like no matter who it goes to, still going to be fun to watch. I think both Cyclone and Paul are going to be insane on both of these. And so it's an interesting draft for the Titans. I guess we just have to wait and see where they actually go.
Well, bad news for you. So far, Paul hasn't played a single competitive Cupid game. Maybe this will be the first one for the Tartarus Titans. We'll jump in to game number 1 between the Titans and the Oni Warriors, a best-of-3 third-place match for our first set of today on the grand final Sunday of the SMITE Summer Masters. And it's not going to be a Cupid mid, so Paul's
come on, it could have been there.
So we're I can't believe you just said that to me, Cor. But it will be Paul back on the Olorun, something that he has played quite a few times up in the past. We are unfortunately going to see the tier go into the solo lane. I was going to pass it over to you, Gore, because I was like, man, I know the kind of the old Smite heads, like we remember the days of Lassus tier jungle, and those were fun days to watch.
The last time I had fun playing jungle personally was when I was allowed to play tier jungle, which for those of you wondering, that's season 2?
At best.
Maybe 3?
At
yeah,
best.
like it definitely, it got, look, it was a little bit of changing. I think it was like, it was definitely something with, I think it was a scaling change on Fearless, and a damage change there, and then a buff on his healing for his 2, like his power cleave, to allow him to just sustain and lane better for a solo laner. It was still real fun. I'm going to be real with you. I liked it a lot, and it was really fun to watch as well, because like a Lawbringer over the wall into a Fearless chain, or that Blink Fearless chain, Lawbringer up down was always very, very, I guess, climactic. It feels weird saying climactic. Normally it's just anticlimactic, but I couldn't think of the opposite of that. That isn't just climactic. Like, it's a very...
Can we say the word exciting too much, I think?
Yeah, okay,
So, like,
that's the one I wanted, though. Exciting is definitely...
But exciting is like the buzzword.
It's like a
of all
good
buzzwords.
punch, right? It was very fun to watch. And so you still get that, but you have to wait like 20 minutes before these solo laners get involved. I like seeing it from the get-go, man. You had level 2 action, maybe, well, actually with the stance switch change. Yeah, level 2 action, you get in there.
Well, I do want to see some action over here in the solo lane. Look, King Arthur versus Tier has got to be, I'll use the word, Gore, one of the most exciting solo lane matchups.
Would you say it's climactic?
I would say it's, well...
exhilarating.
That feels so wrong. Both of you say climactic and tell me how wrong it feels.
At a certain point...
I'll just say hearing it sounds wrong.
Yeah, climactic doesn't really, because, well, anticlimactic.
Is it even a word?
So often used.
It has to be a word if you're throwing anti in front of it.
Right, it's got to be. At any rate, I do hope that we see some pressure over here on the right side of the map. I love the King Arthur versus the Tier matchup just in general, the way that this lane goes. 2 guys wanting to bully one another out. It's like a mechanical battle, it feels like, between Sot and Nika. When you look at the solo lane, 2 of the most mechanically talented solo laners there are in the league. And so a lot of it, I think, lays on layers. Man, I've done that now twice. Lays on layers. And QvoFred as well. Burn some beads. Obviously not over in the solo lane, potentially over in mid. Maybe get the scales tilted for your squad.
QvoFred on this Pele, it's something we didn't really touch up much on as far as the pregame was going through, but with the Hunbats taken away, the Nemesis, a lot of the kind of top-tier premier junglers pulled away. And for QvoFred going into a matchup like this, you got to square off against Paul over in the mid lane to try and find anything. But as soon as Sanctified Field comes up, it just feels like it's going to be so hard for QvoFred to get a rotation towards this mid lane core.
Yeah, I think that's going to be... I mean, that's hard for anybody, right? Like, hey, go kill someone in a Sanctified Fields. The good news is that you can maybe consistently put some pressure. And, you know, Dave, you mentioned burning beads. I don't even know that you're going to be able to get beads off of Paul often. I mean, maybe if you're the Morrigan, if you find a good stun there, or once Neil comes over, some good freezes, but... For the most part, once Sanctified Fields comes up, it feels like that's going to be like the go button, right? If you're Pele, that's where you wait for that, bait it out, then get the kill after.
How does a Dardez Sanctified Field interact with a Paul Sanctified Field? Is everyone just slow?
Oh God, I have never thought about the Olorun versus Olorun potential matchup
if I'm looking at Dardez, his possible transformations, obviously there are plenty of considerations to be had. Tier in certain scenarios, King Arthur in certain scenarios. But like when you look at transforming, so often you're looking at whose ultimate do I want another one of, and it could be Fields of Love, could be the charge in from layers. You have to be considering Sanctified Field if you're the Oni Warriors and Dardez on his transformations. And so yeah, it's hard to gank Paul if he's dropping Sanctified Field, unless you also drop a Sanctified Field.
Well, so here's where things get wild, because the debuff is 40% time dilation slower, right? So you go much slower. But the buff for the Olorun is only 30% bigger. So theoretically, if they both drop it on each other, they're both 10% slower. So it's like, And I don't know. Again, this is now I'm gonna have to go into jungle practice when I get home. Yeah, like math-wise and theoretically, that'll be exactly how it happens. How often are we seeing those line up, dropped on top of each other, and happening all at once? Maybe not too crazy often, but it is. I mean, you talk about big team fight. Yeah, I was gonna say you talk about big team fight ultimates. That's not a bad transformation, I think, for Dardez here.
Could be a great option. We'll look forward to seeing if maybe that one does end up coming up at some point through. And we have been seeing a kind of a transformation in these Magical Hunter builds with the Typhon, or not the Typhon, the Bancroft's Claw and the Nimble Bancroft that's been coming through. We've been seeing a little bit of a deviation from the normal build 4 rings and then a pen item at the end of your build kind of thing. So I'll be curious to see how Paul goes about his build. Already started through, has that Talon Trinket online and the Gilded Arrow, which has been flexing back and forth between a Mannequin Scepter. Now, if you're Layers, it seems like you have a much easier option as far as a gank is concerned. You're going up against a Morrigan and a very immobile NeilMah on this Ymir, and that was in Game 4 against the Dragons yesterday, Gore, where a lot of the struggle came for the Warriors was keeping NeilMah safe on this pick.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see if the the Titans have a way to deal with that a little bit more. Aror, maybe one of the few can go through. What a good fearless.
Link in, NeilMah in danger, silence is good, and SOT drops in the first kill for the Tartarus Titans to get this game going. But at the same time, even with that first blood bounty the Titans grab, the Oni Warriors are still maintaining the gold lead, Dave.
Yeah, look, that's perfect timing from you there, J-Mac, talking about keeping NeilMah safe on this Ymir, isn't it? Yeah, I've loved the way the Oni Warriors have farmed up in the first couple of minutes of this game. A lot of that going to be stabilizing over on right, both the solo laners opting for solo leader here, and I do assume outside of jungle pressure, the right side of the map. We'll take a deep breath and we'll chill out over there. Seems like Dardez has been able to farm up slightly better than Paul here, just the 1 level experience lead, and so as far as minute gold and experience differences, largely will land at the feet of Dardez. But if you're looking at continued game trends now, not the start that NeilMah wanted, but the way that the Titans were able to pile on NeilMah is something that I was expressing concern for the Oni Warriors about during picks and pans. I mean, a silence up from Aror, fearless from Sot, and then damage in from Paul, knock up, knock back, stun. I mean, all of it. I mean, there's so much lockdown that if NeilMah doesn't have good ward coverage and is just sort of strolling casually through the map, I mean, he is a Ymir, and there's an Aror with remove obstacles. A wall isn't going to help you out that much, and might see it again here.
Low to the sky. The 3-man rotation from the Titans to fight against 2. Vote thrown up by Aror, pushed back by Layers. The Joust is available, but Layers won't use it. Instead, it's a Dharmic Pillar, and then the Joust after. Layers grabs the second kill for the Tartarus Titans. NeilMah will be safe, but only because there's a tier 1 tower to back him up.
And that's just the problem you run into when you're Rom, right? Again, I mentioned maybe just the individual matchup versus a Cupid in picks and bans. That's the other side. It's like, hey, cool, you use your ult for safety. You're coming down right in the same spot, man. You're not making it very far. There's a Ganesh, there's a tier. Hell, even Lancelot. Like, there's a lot on the other side that's going to easily catch up to you or body block you or CC you right after you land. And so I think that there's going to be a lot of scenarios where Vote has to worry about exactly that kind of play.
Paul gets Sanctified Field, pushes Qvo, but Qvo's got CC Muni in his ult to get himself on out of there. And now one thing I noticed that is different from every other tier build that we have seen so far, normally it's a rush of Glad Shield or a Sovereignty, bunch of HP stacked on. SOT has instead gone for a Soul Eater right out, getting even more sustain than the tier already had built into his kit.
Yeah, I think the sustain is going to be important for SOT, because think again about what we saw from Variety the other day. SOT is going to need to use the ultimate out here, and sustain will help him stick around a little bit longer in lane. Still some action over in mid.
Paul jumped on, doesn't have the ult this time, will drop the orbs on himself, and the ultimate from Neil will seal the deal for the Oni Warriors to pick up their first kill.
It's fantastic rhyme scheme there from you, J-Man.
Not intentional.
Not intentional. But that's where you can see some value out of NeilMah and this Ymir. Of course, worried about the potential of him getting caught out, but still the setup remains where if you can bait out Sanctified Field, which the Oni Warriors successfully did, I don't know, the halfway back on the cooldown 30, 45 seconds ago, Paul then becomes so susceptible. I mean, it's burning off those beads, a wall and a freeze, and then a dash in from Dardez there on that Morrigan. Becomes so important and so easy to kill off Paul, and which is why I figured we would see some pressure towards this mid lane and why there is a conversation around where are we sticking this Olorun. Well, it's because you got a Morrigan, a Pele, and potentially a roaming Ymir against Paul. And keep your eyes on that Sanctified Field cooldown. I equate that with beads cooldowns here in this game.
A lot of people who I think are going to just continually run back through, right? It's almost always going to be a threat for you to have to deal with. And it showcases, I think, another good point for Dardez. We were wondering where some of those transformations were going to go, and we get to see it into the Pele.
Yep.
And that one gets a lot of good damage when Neil is around. Look, you look at Ganesh, he can get through that wall with his dash, but layers, unless his leap is up, is going to get blocked down. SOT, unless he's either going to blink through it or has to ult over it. Same thing for Cupid, dash, but Paul, he doesn't even have the luxury of a movement ability that's going to help him get super far away. He just has to walk slowly, has a little bit of a knockback, a small self-heal, things like that. Actually, a small team heal if they're close enough, but it's not good enough to be able to escape it. So I think that this Ymir is going to be very controlling. If the Sanctified Fields are down, which now they're back up, if your beads are down, then Neil gets to help control that lane.
Well, we do see a little bit of a deviation from normal Hunter builds. It's always been this Transcendence, occasionally maybe a Dominance first pickup when we're talking about the Hunters. But Vote with literally only one ability that can actually utilize the benefit of the extra power from Transcendence, has instead gone for a Devourer's Gauntlet in that slot. So a little bit of extra lifesteal to maybe box up against CycloneSpin, needs some extra sustain of his own, because as mentioned, Cupid's going to have quite a bit of sustain with those hearts into his kit. So I'm curious as to how that matchup will go and kind of how the build will deviate, at least for Vote as the game goes on, Gore.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where he, like you said, where he continues to go with it. Mainly because Devo's like, I guess sustain is nice, and when your only real defense is I can roll slightly away or go up for a few seconds and hope that they forget about me or maybe we kill them. Yeah, like having some lifesteal in those boxing matches will be nice. It's gonna be good power though, right? And you know, you go back not too long ago, like when it was, I would say absurd. It was powerful before they hit it with that nerf. Now it's probably in the more like just okay area. Like it's a good item. It's just not maybe the best item all around. But if you're looking at someone who's stacking on the other side, Rom doesn't necessarily need the Transcendence as much. So I like the idea of doing something that's going to augment your auto attacks a little bit more, maybe help you in a lot of those fights, and give you some opportunities to maybe kind of sustain yourself throughout any engagements.
Gold Fury started. Quarter HP. Titans haven't given it up. SOT finds a push onto NeilMah. The Gold Fury will go down, and so will Sanctified Field and NeilMah. But massive damage out of Dardez on this Pele. Needs a couple more shots to take down Paul, but Paul trades down, and the damage from SOT is absolutely disgusting. 3 down on the Oni Warriors for just the mid laner. And I don't think that Vote and Nika want to take this boxing match against SOT. One good stance switch will turn this fight back around. And Oh my god, how much healing was that he just got?
Yeah, that's where the sustain of Sada is necessary. And you'll see it continuously throughout the rest of this. He's gonna go back in. I mean, Sot with the ability to do this is a scary Sot, but you do overextend a bit towards the end of that fight. So at least the Oni Warriors able to pull back a couple of kills there. The big differentiator, of course, the Gold Fury going to the Tartarus Titans. But that team fight just so nasty, so worrisome as the game goes on.
Cyclone in a bit of danger, but will be fine for now, only because Nika is not as tanky to dive under that tier 1 tower. Purple buff invade should go the way of the Warriors and maybe even a kill, but luckily for Aror, he's able to go right through that wall. And that's an interaction we don't get to see very often, but it's so satisfying when we do.
We talked about it yesterday, right? Like we were talking about that exact matchup. I don't think we saw it once in that game. When we did say if we did, it was only going to be once. Now Auror's giving it to us a lot.
Wall will block up Nika's path. No mana to the King Arthur, but a great freeze from NeilMah may just be enough to get him out. Paul cannot find the shot, and Layers is trying to take the 2v1, but will not win this one. Snipes from Voter, just a little too good. But maybe Paul can turn this one around, find a little bit of return poke, and it's a 1 pick for the Oni Warriors.
Yeah, I mean, the Titans work so well as a unit that you extend yourself off on your own, and you're going to get picked out. Now that's 2 kills that have been given back to the Oni Warriors by simple overstays, simple overextensions from the Tartarus Titans. You're missing Layers, who's had a really nice game up to this point at 2-1 and 3. Of course, the ultimate out of QvoFred. Potential for a little pressure over on right, but I rewind to that Gold Fury fight where the Tartarus Titans really able to come out ahead, unless we want to keep scrapping. Okay, we're gonna stop. But around that Gold Fury where the Titans were able to pretty handedly win a fight, and then yes, of course, you drop a couple of kills after the fact on overstays. But it's exactly the combo of ultimates and pylons that we were worried about during picks and bans, where Sot can just run around on this tier, get pushbacks, burn beads, force mispositionings out of the Oni Warriors, and then you're fearlessing into a Sanctified Field, into a Dharmic Pillars, into a Fields of Love, because it's such a communication check from the Oni Warriors. All right, there's a Sanctified Field here, Dharmic Pillars here, Fields of Love here. By the way, there's a tier pushing us into all of it. So that disruption makes a massive difference for the Tartarus Titans. And then just continued pressure to pull out the Pyro.
And this is a team that, again, that aggression, it's the fearlesses you have to be worried about.
Sanctified Field, and all of the CC in the world keeps Nika locked against the wall for a solid 3 to 4 seconds for the Tartarus Titans to pick up not just a Pyromancer, but an extra kill to boot with that.
Yeah.
And it took that kill and Pyromancer to actually bring the game back for the Tartarus Titans as far as gold is concerned. They got that objective earlier on. But the Oni Warriors have been swinging it back towards their favor every single time through. This is the first time that we're really seeing the Titans try and hold this lead now, Gore.
Yeah, and it's not even like they've lost a lot, right? It all has to be in neutral farm, and they got the big objectives, so that's where things, I think, showcase how well the Warriors are playing aggressive. There's only a tier 1 missing on right-hand side, and admittedly, I think Sot's gotten more value from the rotations that he would have gotten out of just having that tier 1 up for themselves. But it is interesting to see that it's been a struggle for them to get that gold back in their favor. I'm also interested because, Dave, like you mentioned, and we don't get to really see it there, but looking at their team fight, it is going to be a lot of CC, a lot of really good ults, a lot of great walls that maybe are blocking you off or maybe setting you up, depending on where Neil throws those during the fights for the Titans. But the other side of it, we've seen a lot of, Neil just doing good walls. That feels great. So it feels like that shell needs to become a Phantom Shell sooner rather than later. But also you're getting good transformations from Dardez, which I can't believe I'm saying this because it's so not going to happen. But like to the point where if you pop the Phantom Shell and they only have 1 shell, maybe you transform into a Ymir and just get another really good wall thrown up there. Good freezes. Nah, I don't think you go for that. Instead, I like what Dardez has been doing. It's been the transformation into the Pele. And that last fight, if there is no tier, or if that tier is able to get beat so that Fearless isn't as nasty as it was, Dardez is able to get a couple more kills. He got a lot of damage out there with that ult.
And Gore, I do look back towards the duo lane and some of their builds. If you're analyzing the builds now about halfway through this game.
Yeah.
Difference in first item, yes, Transcendence for CycloneSpin, then Devour's Gauntlet for Vote. Both have gone attack speed and then health shred on either side, which then lends me to start looking at where are some of the health items, which of course you start considering Sot. His build has picked up in pace a little bit here, where he's gone with the tier 1 earrings that we've seen added a couple of times into the Genjis, and then looks like you know, cheaper item there to finalize the build for Sot. So there's still plenty of health to shred through here. Sot has gone kind of hybrid from what we've seen with health, movement speed, yes, on that final item. And so that opens up the door to Vote to really deal with this tier a bit later on, where Sot hasn't gone full health and movement speed, a bit more hybrid in that build. So these Kinsai should get some value.
Yeah, that's, I think, the biggest pickup. That plus the Silver Branch already online. Like, it feels like Vote, as long as you're allowed to just exist for a little while in some of the backlines, should have a lot of easy damage to throw out there.
Sot wants to get some pressure for his team around this Gold Fury. Finds about half of QvoFred's HP with that Fearless combo. And now we have all 10 members of the team grouped up around. But QvoFred's got to go back a little bit early because of how much health he lost during the initial engagement. NeilMah throws up another wall. Trebuchet for the Titans has been pushing up left. It's kept Vote occupied for the time being. But how long will it keep the Oni Warriors in general occupied? Because nobody's really left this side of the map. We do see layers starting to rotate over towards the right a little bit, but the Oni Warriors are still standing firm by this Fury.
Well, and Layers is the one who needs to rotate out. We've seen first item and second item transit. He's gone for it in the third slot.
Oh, yeah.
So he's going to have an interesting power spike, but is it going to work here?
NeilMah finds a freeze, but is now in trouble. Pushed back by Sot and right to his own death. Tartarus Titans Cyclone goes in, gets the beats off of Vote, who will roll himself away. Dardez stealths up. And now it's a 5v4 power play for the Titans as we move towards the Fury.
Got to be a perfect, I mean, Neil has to position perfectly or else he dies every single time. And now the Oni Warriors, a chance to push back in. Fury gets leashed out by the Titans.
Pushed back by Layers. QvoFred forced to ult out. So for SOT, Snipe plus the damage. Needs that third shot, but won't find it. Dardez gets the fadeaway at the very least. But the Primal Fury has been picked back up by the Titans. Sanctified Field will guarantee
Dardez.
the Fury, but Dardez finds a stun onto Aror, transforms into the Lancelot, charges in, finds the double root, finds the second dash, but needs a little bit more. The Tarmic Pillar's not enough to hold back Nika. Cyclone finds a stun up against one, Layers finds the kill, and jumps off the horse, but QvoFred will put him down only if he makes it out. Vote needs one more shot against Paul, but Paul and Cyclone both make it out.
What a bloodbath. I don't even know where to start with that one. I mean, at 3 for 3, but the Fury goes towards the Titans. That's a win, I think, at the end of that one. Yeah, gold. Hey, guess what? You'll be not surprised to find out very much right next to each other. Technically in favor of the Titans, but wow. I mean, the way things just went in that fight, I think you get to see a lot of good aggression. If that Snipe maybe closes down for Vote and forces Dardez, or allows Dardez to start pulling back a little quicker, maybe there's a quicker rotation in. Maybe somebody dies on the Titans. They get a 4 for 3, and we start talking more about like where those are. But you get a really, really fun engagement there. Our early beads were forced by Vote. I thought that meant for sure that we were going to see Sot kind of just ruin this fight. And with Neil dying as soon in that, I guess technically it's like a 4 maybe going in favor of the Titans there. It feels like that should have been a much easier fight for them, but I like that the Warriors are willing to come up and scrap, and only in moments where they know they can, right?
Yeah.
Don't step up that Pyromancer because there's no good reason for you to with everybody kind of scattered to the winds. But when you're all shifted around, especially with a Fire Giant coming up, I don't think anybody's really feeling confident in their capabilities right now.
Yeah, right. I do think you see the potential downfall of Sot if he is left just out of striking range of Vote, and how different that fight could have looked if Vote wasn't able to just shred through Sot's health bar, because Dardez and Vote, those are the two that Sot will be walking towards a good bit of the time. And Witchblade picked up for Sot with that final item. Really like this addition. Might get to see him flex his muscles a bit around the FG.
I actually think that might be one of my favorite pickups. Like, it's just one of my favorite items in general whenever you have some heavy auto attackers on the other side. Because, yeah, it doesn't necessarily need to be more than just Vote that it's hitting, but it is definitely very helpful up against Vote. But also being able to slow down the attacks from, like, Pele's, and with Dardez transforming into a Pele more often, just kind of making sure that some of that damage isn't going to be there. Pele's a lot more ability damage, but, you know, even on the autos for her ult, it at least will maybe feel like something to help him out.
Good wall by Neil. Holds CycloneSpin in place, and he's got nowhere to go. So Vote will pick up the 8th kill for the Oni Warriors. We continue to get this fight back. Now that opens up the door for an objective towards the right side of the map, but 4 of the Warriors are backing. Everyone on the Tartarus Titans that is alive has instantly made that rotation to the right side, maybe expecting the Warriors to go to the Fire Giant, Dave.
Yeah, fantastic pick there from the Oni Warriors. And that's now what we've seen on a couple different instances when the Titans are playing together as 5. it feels near unbeatable. It's like a stone wall, an ice wall, I guess, in Neil's case, that the Oni Warriors keep running into or are forced into by SOT. But it's the individuals that keep breaking, and the Oni Warriors have been able to shred them down, whether it's Vote, whether it's Dardez, QvoFred. That's where the Oni Warriors have found their value, and a chance at a 4v5 around the FG.
Forcing SOT out with a wall by NeilMah. The Oni Warriors will once again give up the Fire Giant and then go right back to it to start this dance all over again. Now, Vote doesn't have any crit in the build, so it's going to take a little bit while longer for this Fire Giant to go down. Aror gets stunned out, eats a ton of damage, knock from QvoFred. The wall means that he's not going to go anywhere. QvoFred finds another pick, but CycloneSpin is back up. Oni Warriors disengage from the Fire Giant.
It's unfortunate that the one guy that had 2 ways to get out of the wall could not use either of them because of the other CC chain. Like, you've got the Phantom Shell, you've got your own dash. Can you get through it? No, I think the Warriors just play that well. But in a spot, once again, where, like, now you've got this leverage, you're in a 5v4, you've got advantage. Can you really do much with it? I think they can step up to the FG and force a fight, but I'm surprised to see it be as slow as it was. I think that the presence of a Sanctified Fields, to me, is enough to kind of make this a wary call, just if Paul's willing to step up. Sot might just get burned down before they can really do anything, and honestly, that might just put this one to rest.
I think it might. But I want to shout out Cuvo. He had a really nice body block there on Aror, who was trying to dash out through the wall.
And he caught him out.
To popping his bubble. Right back to the FG, though. This one will go to the Oni Warriors on a nice bit of pressure. And so, you know, you've continued now to see this downfall from the Titans, where one guy steps up, gets caught out, and the Titans haven't been able to fully forge together that 5-strong spearhead into a team fight since the Gold Fury fight earlier on in the game. This time it's Aror who ends up getting caught out. It's a rare mistake from Aror in this game, where he's otherwise been playing very well and very safe. But the Titans just haven't really given themselves a chance to group and team fight and allow Sot to put pressure out onto the map. He's now finished his Emperor's Armor, sells off the Tier 1 earring. And so, you know, it's definitely not dire just yet for the Tartarus Titans. You're going to be on Tier 2 defense, maybe Phoenix line defense. Not that far down in gold. They just haven't given themselves a chance. Continuously losing one member here or there has made a massive difference.
The Oni Warriors, we've seen what their team fight looks like in the jungle. We've seen what these more scrappy engagements look like when they're given the freedom and the luxury of not having anything fighting back against them besides the Tartarus Titans. But Gor, as we start pushing in towards these Tier 2s, as we start moving in towards the Phoenixes, how difficult is it for the Oni Warriors to get into these structures and trying to take a fight to the Titans?
Yeah, well, there's a Sanctified Fields on the other side. And that blanket statement when it comes down to like how narrow the passages and the entrances to the Phoenixes are, kind of covers you as long as it's up, so keep your eyes on Paul's ult. You've also got Fields of Love, so I think they've got a lot of like good area of denial just to make sure that it's difficult to enter the Phoenix sub 30 minutes, right? When you need your minion wave, things like that, you've got decent clear on multiple people that are going to not have to step out of the Phoenix line to do it, so you'd have to heavy commit to it, and they don't have an Emperor's Armor or anything like that online for the Warriors, so I think that right now, Tier 2 defenses are maybe the real conversation for the Warriors, is if they have to deal with that. The answer should be no. I can't imagine the Titans trying to step up to it. But when it comes down to Phoenixes, you know, Paul, even though Olorun doesn't maybe have, like, outside of Sanctified Fields, like these massive AoEs like we're used to seeing out of some of the other mages, it's still enough that it's going to, you know, either commit a lot of damage into one spot or he's going to be able to throw some autos over there. Same thing for, like, a CycloneSpin Heart Bomb. Might not be the most massive area that you're going to be able to hit. In fact, the targeter for it way smaller than even the explosion. But it's enough that it's going to make it, like, difficult to step forward to them without taking a lot of poke.
I wonder how much of the Oni Warriors and their siege could potentially start. I mean, I know Vote wants to be safe. There's potentially a world where Vote, because we've seen this a couple of times just in SMITE of past, where Vote could go up into the ultimate and see if he can poke out Paul or CycloneSpin to just volley out those ultimates, getting some nice power built up through that Silver Branch later on in the build. Of course, Devourer's Gauntlet now fully stacked. Gives you some a nice bit of power as well. And so I think if you're the Oni Warriors and you're concerned about initiation, there's potentially a world where Vote feels like he's safe enough in the back line and you're sieging and Sot can't get out of tower line and can't wrap all the way around your team. You don't need to use that ultimate defensively. Vote could kind of crack some of the health bars early on, make the dive easier from QvoFred. Blink, dash in from Pele is much easier when the target is already down to half HP. Same for CycloneSpin. Layers, pretty squishy, but high damage, of course, on this Lancelot. Potentially could be an option for the Oni Warriors if they are slightly concerned about their ability to just charge into the base of the Tartarus Titans.
It does seem with that first Fire Giant for the Oni Warriors, they're just going to use it to only take the towers. About 20 seconds left before that buff fades away, and a Fire Giant power play is over for the Oni Warriors. So getting a nice little influx of gold and getting themselves set up for the next Fire Giant is going to be key. But that does allow the Tartarus Titans some time to group up because they don't have to worry about any kinds of fire minions, Dave. They don't have to worry about having to defend anything. They can just group up and be ready for this jungle fight.
Did I see a frozen shark in NeilMah's wall? That's what I sat up.
They got fishies.
I could have sworn there was a full-on frozen. Well, he's not going to toss it up for us. And
yeah, Neil, just as an example,
and
give
there's
us a
one
wall.
in it. There might be one in his club too.
Yeah, have you never played this game?
Might be like a swordfish or something.
Yeah, there's like fishies
There's a
in
big
there.
old fish.
There is. It's got its
The
mouth
fish's
is
head
open
is just
too.
sticking out. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's
Is that
ready
big
to-
mouth Billy Bass?
Yeah, I think NeilMah has actually put together a nice couple of kills here for his team. After getting caught out early on, I was like, oh no, we're gonna get the NeilMah Ymir game where he's just getting jumped on by SOT all game long. I think the bubble has made a big difference now and should continue to make a big difference for Neil. Just allowing, again, a slight mispositioning here or there, whether it's CC brought to you by SOT in most cases or any of the other Tartarus Titans, gives NeilMah a bit more breathing room. And you need that on the Ymir. You got to be able to step up, drop a freeze, drop a wall. It's about playing around some of the initiation from the Titans, and NeilMah's had a nice turnaround performance in the last 20 or so.
And again, because there's only so much they can do on the other side. They went for one Phantom Shell, and then just the dash from Aror is going to be helpful. Again, if we saw it actually in the last engagement, commits his ult to just a disengage, then you can get out of there. If Layers wants to do something similar, right, and commit to just a disengage, then it's going to be, I guess, escapable, survivable, but it's definitely not the ideal world for it. Let's see. No, yeah, they're just big fishies. They're not sharks. So I had to double check.
And Layers to the back line. Sanctified Field boats up in the sky, but he's going to be low health bar when he lands down into a field delay potentially. Vote rolls away from SOT, and Nika pushed away and separated by a wall. Layers is low, Layers is gone, and so is Paul. Nika, living on a sliver of HP, will dash through, and that is 3 down on the Tartarus Titans. Layers and SOT, the last 2 members alive to deal with the 4 strong of the Oni Warriors. But it seems that they're not going to continue this chase, nor are they going to go for the Fire Giant. It's just a disengage.
And I honestly think that that's, again, just good play from the Warriors, right? I mean, being able to get in there. And it's the ults from Dardez, I think, that are really kind of opening things up. And it's something that you don't think about too often. Like, the burst from Pele is a lot, but when you have those AoE cone autos afterward as well on 2 people, that's a lot of area that you're covering with damage that just otherwise really wouldn't get hit.
Yeah, I mean, look, Oni Warriors now actually feeling like they've got a better chance at breaking open the base, maybe forcing SOT's hand, and the tier will jump into the back line.
Nika dashes in, deals with Layers while SOT tries to deal with the rest of the Warriors. But Layers doesn't want to be a part of that action anymore. Mid Phoenix goes down, and SOT is forced to retreat. But now all the members of the Titans who had just died in the previous fight are back up. It's only a mid Phoenix down, but even still, that is a win for the Warriors. Finding 3, finding a Phoenix, and can now reset towards enhanced Fire Giant.
And look, they've got the burn to be able to do this if they want to. Ults are still a little precarious for them. Like, Neil not having his is maybe the most negligible thing in the world because he's only been using it for like some extra damage. And early on, it makes a bigger difference, but as we approach this portion of the game, Ymir ult's like objective secure at best, and even then there's better options on the wall. I'm very much on the same boat as you though, Dave. If I see an engage, if it's not the King Arthur, or if you want someone half health poked out, I wouldn't mind seeing Vote go up into the air.
SOT and Nika trying to deal with the opposite teams. SOT half HP, Fields of Love used, Votes up in the sky to get away from it, and the pillars are down, and so is Sanctified Field and Cyclone's health bar. QvoFred finds the first kill of the fight, but it will be a trade out. Dardez to the back line, lots of damage against Paul. Nika finds the last hit, but all that damage is coming from the mid laner. And Dardez able to really make some strides for the Oni Warriors, but he's going to be forced to go back.
Well, it really feels like if the Oni Warriors can step back from that initial Sanctified Field and survived the initial onslaught from the Titans that I was so worried about earlier on in the game. They've had the ability to turn around these fights. The double Peles have been near unstoppable from the Oni Warriors. It's that second wind in the fight. And actually, we did see a bit of that from Vote just now. Goes up into the ultimate, chunks down large portions of the Squishy's health bars with the snipes. And it's gotten the Tartarus Titans all out of whack. And once the Sanctified Field is down, once the Fields of Love, I mean, once all that no-play zone is on the field and the Oni Warriors are able to survive it, that's when you see Dardez transform, go back in, and it's the second rush in, the counter-punch style of play from the Oni Warriors, I think has caught the Titans a bit off guard.
And they've just got so much of it, right? Because it's not even limited to, like, Dardez. It's like, okay, cool, all of the other cooldowns for initiation for this team are just regular abilities. Like, it's not like it's an ult, like, oh, hey, if there's a Hunbats, you know where your initiation is most of the time. But I see Pele, that one's going to be usually oriented around the ult, but if you have Dardez, then you can just ult and go back into it. But otherwise, it's a wall from Ymir, or it's just King Arthur existing on that side of the map and getting aggressive. And maybe I guess the ROM snipes, and that one you can tie to the ultimate, but otherwise it's low cooldowns that they have, a good freeze, a good wall, King Arthur spinning at you, you know, things like that the Warriors are just going to be able to have up at the first punch, fall back, and while they're falling back, the cooldown ticks down, and then when they want to do that counter punch, not just alongside the Morrigan, they can throw up a wall, and all of a sudden it's very easy to get back in there.
And we did really get to see kind of a lot of how those engages work between them. I mean, Nika goes through, picks up Aror, so what does SOTs do? Well, his response is, okay, well, if their solo laner's in my backline, I've got to be in their backline. So he jumps into 3. Unfortunately, he gets the worst end of that trade because he jumps into 3 people versus just the 1 from Nika. And then, as you mentioned there, Dave, Dardez is able to go with the reinitiation on this Morrigan, transforming into the Pele, which has been pretty much the only transformation that we've been seeing out of him so far. Yeah,
I mean, there's just so much burst damage that's backloaded in these team fights. Because if obviously QvoFred can't choose when to be Pele, he's just been the Pele. But QvoFred will find a lot of the chunk damage. And actually, I think the ROM snipes not only for the damage that we've talked about, but the semi-moment of disengage. Because what's better for a counter-punch style of play than a second to step back, take a breather, and then also do damage that's going to allow your team to move forward? Because it's really at the inflection point of that fight when Vote goes up into the air and you see the transformation. Don't know why that word was hard for me to remember from Dardez. And then the Pele jumps in and finishes off some of that burst. And so I still think there's footing in this game for the Titans. I don't know about after this team fight. Could be go back, get Fire Giant for the Oni Warriors. But layers has just been stifled so heavily. I think the walls have actually made a pretty big difference in blocking off layers and a lot of the galloping in that this Lancelot wants to do. And so I think in areas where Neil had a tough early game, getting pushed back a couple of times, taken down, not only in setting up for his team, but preventing a lot of what the Titans want to do. Something as simple as a fishy wall getting thrown up has prevented so much of that one big burst team fight from really reaching the Oni Warriors.
And it's a lot of, like, you know, J-Mac, you mentioned this, and I think it plays into the factor here, because even if you get by as layers, or if you get in there as SOT, you're jumping into Vote, who is just shredding your health bar anyway. So, and not only that, for most of them, your escape then can get canceled out if he hits you with any of his cripple arrows, anything like that. So it really does make a big difference. Like, you know, he gets one shot, but all of a sudden you're locked down, and he can just keep slinging autos at you as much as he wants. And worst case scenario for Vote so far, I mean, in early game we saw it kind of come back to bite him, but since then, if you ult, your team then comes up around you. When by the time you land, that guy's either dead or he's CC'd enough that you just roll back and kill him yourself. And so I think there's a lot of problematic engage for the Titans, not necessarily because their engage is bad, but because the Warriors have done a good job kind of countering that, not only in like picks, but in play, to make sure that every single one of them is going to feel like they have to almost overcommit to get something done. And every single time it happens, the Warriors now, like, at first it was, okay, cool, they killed 3, we killed 3. Now it's, okay, they killed 1, we killed 2. Or, oh, they killed 1 and we killed 3. Like, we're getting the better trade if you're the Warriors every single time, and it's resulted in the Fire Giant, resulted in Phoenix, all of the towers. Like, it's just slowly but surely starting to roll in their favor.
And I think we got a really good execution of what happens with miscommunication for the Titans, because we talk about all of these area of denials they have, Fields of Love, Sanctified Field, Dharmic Pillars. All 3 of those, if you can stack them and get one person in there, they're basically guaranteed dead at that point. No way somebody survives all 3 of those unless they have things like a Beads and an Aegis. And we saw what happens when Vogt gets 2 of them thrown on him, and he just ults up, and now that's 2 big team fight ults at least down there. But we are going to take it to a very quick break as we try and get these players back into the game, so we'll be back in just a few minutes.
Say you don't wanna get in trouble, that you doing fine cause you got me. I don't wanna break your little bubble, but you gotta wake up to reality. Cause I can see in your eyes, your head is full of dreams. Tears aren't proof of failure, you just gotta let them flow without judge. There's so many ways to be happy. You can do whatever you like. You don't have to be ready. You just gotta trust the right. Don't have to be scary. You just gotta follow the light. You're able to be happy. You can do whatever you like. You don't have to be ready. You don't have to be. I see you hesitating while you're waiting, like somebody's gonna give it to you. You gotta chase it, gotta believe it. You gotta go get it for yourself. Cause I can see in your eyes, your head is full of dreams. Tears aren't proof of failure. You just gotta let them flow without judge. There's so many ways to be happy. You can do whatever you like. You don't have to be ready. You just gotta trust the right. Don't have to be scary. You just gotta follow the light. You're able to be happy. You can do whatever you like. You don't have to be ready. You don't have to be. You don't have to be ready. You don't have to be. You are like me, and I'm like you. You are like me, and I'm like you. There's so many ways to be happy. You can do whatever you like. You don't have to be ready. You just gotta trust the right. Don't have to be scary. You just gotta follow the light. You're able to be happy. You can do whatever you like. You don't have to be ready. You don't have to be.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back into game number 1. Apologies for the delay, but just to let you know exactly what happened, unfortunately, we had a very awkward interaction with the Magi's Revenge, and, well,
Morrigan.
Nika got to become a god for a moment and move at supersonic speed, so he had to go reset himself over in the fountain, but we are now back into game. And 35 minutes in, Oni Warriors have a pretty commanding lead, a 9,000 gold lead moving in towards this enhanced fire giant fight. Tartarus Titans have the tools, and it's something that we mentioned kind of on the desk before we went into that break. They have all the tools, all of this denial zone play that they can have, but it's just a matter of stacking it in the proper place as these fights continue to break out.
And I'm excited to see, again, maybe how they can engage on this. For the Titans, this is where things get, I mean, just troublesome, right? Like trying to find your engage, the proper engage that doesn't feel like an overcommit, that doesn't feel like you're out of position. These Ymir walls change everything. And look, you might be able to kill Neil off if he steps out of position or if he steps up too far, but he has been doing a very good job of making sure that even if he's caught out and even if he gets killed off, someone on the other side is going to feel the burn.
SOT loses about half of his HP pretty quickly. Not a whole lot of actual defensive stats to his name besides just HP. And you can see what Vote and what Dardez are able to do with that kind of HP shred to their name. Nika finds a double stun up against SOT and Aror, but cannot continue much further forward. Aror throws up the Dharmic Pillars, a wall in the backline. Aror is gone. Vote has found the damage, but SOT has found the kill on Vote. Even NeilMah will go down as he gets stuck in place, and now QvoFred is forced to ult out of the Fields of Love, and now it's the Tartarus Titans who have advantage around the fire.
And that's just a good engage for him, right? I mean, you jump in, you get exactly what you need, which is a lockdown. Those Dharmic Pillars may be perfectly placed by Aror. Finds 3, but specifically keeps Vote locked away so that it's much easier to get to the ROM, isolate him. And, you know, Vote had ult. There was definitely a world where either a shell gets popped, because that one was still available, and you go up into the air, or, you know, something that saves you and gives you a little more time. But Layers just jumped in maybe a little too quickly for him to really react to.
And look, for the Titans, if you're able to get that much out of just a couple of your combos, we're talking about if you layer all of your ultimates on top of one another, that's where you're going to win these fights. If you're able to get
Layers
a lot
only
out
has
of...
one ult.
Say again?
Layers only has one ult. He
God,
can't.
why have I said the word layer so many
You've
times?
been really on
I have. All right. If you drop that many,
flavor word of the
all of
day.
your ultimates on top of one another, yes, you should find value. But it's when you can continue the team fights by then dropping a Fields of Love somewhere else, then using a Sanctified Field somewhere else, where the Titans can push that value. Vote never got a chance to go into his ultimate in that fight. I think that's a massive difference maker, not only to not reset the fight, gets no damage, gets no chance to shred the front line of the Tartarus Titans. And I do want to give a shout out. Well, I do have the chance. Spikes picked up here by Aror. Not something we see all that often. Or Manticore Spike, I guess, just the one spike. But
Could be spikes.
Could be spikes, depending on how many he drops. But don't get to see it often. You get some CCR. I mean, health, that's always going to be great, depending on whether or not Vote can shred it away from you. But a fun, unique look, and we'll see if any of that can make a difference here. For the
It was one of those items that when it was put into the game, I was really excited to see how often it would get picked up, and then I think this is actually literally the first time that it's been played in a professional game. Again, sometimes just needing fix. Like you said, interesting stats on that. Feels good as a support. I'm curious to see if it's going to help him out too well or too much here. And because it's interesting, like the alternative to it, which has been with these tiers, J-Mac, you highlighted this earlier, but like buying the tier 1 in the earring and then usually just selling it later, and that's been, it's the exact same route here. It's the Emperor's Armor now in that slot for SOT. And so, you know, I'm going to keep my eyes on this Ganesha. Roar has been trading his life out, but those Dharmic Pillars are perfect.
Fearless into the Fields of Love. NeilMah is being juggled by the Tartarus Titans. He will be the first casualty of the fight. QvoFred ults in towards Paul, and Layers will go in as well. Cuvo on a sliver of health. One shot would be all that would be needed to take him down, but SOT will up down in place. Asunder onto Dardez. Layers wants this kill, but does not know where Dardez has ended up. Instead, it's Layers on the back end of the fight going down. Nika swipes him away.
Wow, what a great fight from the Tartarus Titans, and it's Layers who drops at the end of that fight. And look at all of the ultimate cooldowns for the Tartarus Titans. They're down. Dardez never had to transform at the beginning of that fight, middle of that fight, end of that fight. Dardez was just able to exist. And so this Morrigan, you know, not only dynamic in the jungle fights when you transform into the Pele, which is what we've seen for that double burst down, but Dardez has made such a difference on the back end of these fights and the beginning. You know, on either end, the stealth and the stun has made the Titans have to think twice about where they're positioning. Now the downside is we have seen now over the last couple of fights a regression to early game from Neil, where SOT is able to fearless into a sanctified field, and Neil is a bit of an afterthought for the Tartarus Titans. We'll deal with Neil first and then just win the rest of the fight after the fact. And so, you know, you really need to keep this Ymir on the map in a proper position when when you're in an area of the map where the walls are going to be making such a big difference,
Yes.
that's where Neil really's got to keep his positioning in mind and watch out for the Fearlesses.
The thing, though, is you even burned, like, as fast as they burned Neil. Vote didn't have to use relics, right? Used his ult. You had mentioned it, 1 relic usage there for Dardez, but otherwise keeps his ult, maintains a lot of their pressure on the map. And so I'm excited to see what the Warriors are going to be able to do to adjust to this. I think they've got a lot of burn. Qvo has his ult back up. Should be able to go deep into the fight.
Fire down to a quarter. QvoFred down to nothing. The Fire Giant has not been leased. The Oni Warriors will grab it. But can they find a way out of the fight? Dardez up in the sky, throwing some snipes, but he's gonna land right back into a sanctified field. Quarter HP on him and nothing left to his name. Paul finds the pickup there. It is 2 down and maybe a third as Nika has gone too far into enemy territory. The Tartarus Titans have taken 3 off the map despite losing the fire.
I'll look at the bright side, though. They keep the fire on Vote, and that feels like it's going to be helpful. That's about the only bright side at the end of that, though. This is so much time. I mean, virtually a minute to work with without 2, another half minute there without QvoFred. So if you're looking to burn down a Phoenix, this might be the easiest time to do so as the Titans. Again, a lot of ults that have been used on the other side. Maybe Vote gets some good shots and you have to be careful here, but I don't think you're that stressed. 41 minutes into the game, you're going to have plenty of damage to be able to get some burn onto the Phoenix. And then I don't know that they can end. Qvo's going to be back in 15.
Yeah, low death timers on Qvo, but you're getting your ultimates back. Titans looking for the end in game 1.
They want it. It's up to Vote and Neil to put out the damage to hold them back. Wall will block Cyclone. 2 seconds on Qvo, but less time than that. The Titan is down to a quarter HP. Into the backline they go. Qvo finds 1, 2 are dead. The health bars are low, but the Titan goes down. And the Tartarus Titans find game number 1 over the Warriors.
Look, Qvo made 1 miracle respawn defense earlier this year. I kind of was holding out hope that there would be another. And the damage was there. It was just that 2-3 second period that really made the difference for them.
The Titans win this game down 7,000 gold.
Yeah.
I mean, the Titans, and it's the Fire Giant fight. You rewind the clock. Yes, the only where it's Nika who's able to secure the FG. But the team fight is blowing up around the Oni Warriors around that Fire Giant. And where does it start? It's an early pick from a tier. It's a knockback into layers, dealing burst damage. And then when you open up the opportunity to the Titans to say, all right, we don't need these ultimates to team fight. We can now use these ultimates to just chase down the remaining targets. Yeah. Oni Warriors are in a horrible spot. So we saw both sides of tier play towards the end of this game, where SOT is able to set up, knock back into an individual pick, gives the Titans the advantage and more freedom in how they want to use their ultimates. And we saw the opposite, where tier got picked. Unfortunately for the Oni Warriors, it was the good version for the Tartarus Titans at the end of the game.
Yeah, the Tartarus Titans are able to find the one team fight that they need in this game to be able to push in and find themselves a victory for game number 1. We're going to take it to a quick break. When we come back, game number 2 right around the corner.
The Horsey, and Horsey, don't you stop! Fido King! Fido King!
I gave up dabbing for Lynn.
Cool. No more dabbing for Final Call. He looked at me and said, I'm going to be on that stage next year. I'm going to become a world champion.
Ripping through! Titan down, ball 3! A double kill myself!
Feeling guilty for so long. Baby, they're not friends, they are enemies. Don't you tell them yes, tell them get lost. Cause every time you go and ask for help, they say sorry, but I'm busy. So you end up doing it yourself. Ooh,
Welcome back to the SMITE Summer Masters Grand Finals day in our third place match. Game number 1 goes to the Tartarus Titans, despite the fact that the Titans were down for the majority of the game. I mean, ending the game at, I think it was what Dave called 7,000 gold down, but one team fight is sometimes all it takes to turn the tides of the fight, especially when we're pushing near 40 minutes of gameplay here. Gormizer, all throughout this game, the Oni Warriors were able to maintain a lead throughout, even if the Titans were able to find an objective or find a few picks. Oni Warriors maintain that lead, but at the end, lead doesn't matter when you just get wiped at the end of it all.
Yeah, and you get to see a lot of it, right? Really, really good engage from the Titans towards the end that just leads to one after the other. Almost enough of a defense to me to create at least some suspense, right? Qvo's like just almost able to respawn in time, but the damage wasn't there, which is unfortunate for the Warriors after having such a command and control of that game. And for a long time as well. I mean, most of the engages, you can even see it. Like, even here, like, this one's good because
That's
it's a single
right
target. And that's, if that goes right for you for the Titans, then you're set. If it doesn't, then you're not. And for a lot of the times, they weren't. But they were lucky that they ended up getting that one. A lot of picks on the Neil. That started things off. But that last engage and kind of split tactic that they used to get in there really just opened the door for them in a fight that otherwise would not have happened.
Yeah, and I don't know if I mean, Sod had a really nice game on this tier, ends with a really attractive KDA. I don't know if I'm entirely sold on it. I think in the right scenarios it can work, and this ended up another example of it being the right scenario, where Neil at the end of this game, you're 40 minutes in, Neil is just not allowed to play. It's sort of an awkward, I just think kind of an awkward way to end this game for the Oni Warriors.
Yeah.
I know we had to pause the game halfway through, weird interaction with Morrigan, and then getting Mad Guy's revenge as well, because you get the new itemization, and then that can double proc, and so I do think part of it's unfortunate for the Oni Warriors and how things worked out. That said, I mean, that final team fight with NeilMah getting picked and the Titans still having ultimates left over to chase down the Oni Warriors, that's unrelated, and so I think definitely some unfortunate stuff there for the Oni Warriors, but the Titans played around their strengths late in that game, at least in the one team fight that really mattered, very effectively, and had enough gas in the tank to end the game.
And it was being fun, at least seeing kind of the build diversity that was coming from SOT on this tier. Started out with the Soul Leader, immense amount of sustain and lane. I mean, he was going from half health to full with a single power cleave on a minion wave out there. Yeah. And then as the game progressed, we saw the tier 1 earrings get picked up, then later sold for Emperor's Armor. We then saw late game, at least the Soul Leader then get sold and picked up a Wing Blade in its place. So a lot of chance to kind of play around with the build style. So we've gotten at least a decent amount of data on the tier. We'll see if that does make it through once again for the Tartarus Titans. We jump into picks and bans for game number 2, see if there are any switch-ups there. This Morrigan definitely proved to be a real pain, at least for the Tartarus Titans to deal with throughout the early and the mid game. Once that late game came through, maybe a little bit easier for the Titans to handle Gore.
Yeah, I'm curious as to how they'll change things up, though, because, like you said, it was a little easier towards the very end of it. And it's also something that Paul likes to play, and Paul can play really well. So, last time it worked out well because it was like, cool. Is Morrigan like a first pickable god when Lancelot is up? When your Khepris are up, your Yemojas are up, things like that. Cupid and Lancelot, like, probably not. She falls a little further down the tier list than that. So as a second pick team, it was really easy to grab her. Can you do the same thing if you're here, if you're the Warriors? Are you going to first pick her, you going to banner, or are you going to let the Titans have her?
As the first wave of bans goes through, the Lancelot will not make it through this time. The Oni Warriors not willing to give that one up over to Layers yet again. Alongside that, Hell and Kabrakan banned away. And the Tartarus Titans continue to keep a bit of a spread as far as their bans are concerned. But their change-up here is now throwing the E-set into the mix, which leaves a perfect pick open for Dardez in the mid lane.
Yeah, we love the AMC for Dardez. Look, this is a style of pick that gets you good lane pressure, but also covers a lot of your bases later in the game. If you're worried about prot shred specifically, remember in game 1, the Oni Warriors needed more of that health shred to deal the healthier targets of the Titans, and really, I mean, they stuck it to Sot for a good portion of that game. It's the one fight, again, that tilts things back to the Titans at the end of game 1. But I think this is a great way to diversify the types of damage that you'll be doing, especially if you lock in the Freya, which the Oni Warriors do. So you get this big, you get shred and burst damage with the AMC.
Yemoja, Do not
Prot
forget.
Shred and then burst damage with the AMC and the Stinger, as well as late game chainsaw minigun style of auto attack damage shred for the Freya, as well as a great pick from NeilMah. So I love the Oni Warriors top 3 here. I think you get some safety with the Freya, some lockdown with the Yemoja. I'm slightly worried about the ability for the Titans to jump on top of this AMC, though. That's always the downfall of an Muzen Cobb, is if I can't get off my Stinger, can't get off my burst damage because I'm being dove on, then I'm not having a great time. And you've got a Morrigan Ratatoskr on the other side. Potential for 2 dives in from the Tartarus Titans.
And this Ratatoskr has been very successful for layers over the course of their gameplay. Even in their matchup against the Kings, they were still going back and forth there. I mean, he had 4 of his last 6 games were on this Ratatoskr, a 7-3, 2-2, a 4-0, a 4-1. I think he had a 13-2 or a 13-3 in a previous set as well. So this Ratatoskr has been dangerous to put into Layer's hands. But as the wave of bans goes through, Hunbats and Nemesis taken away by the Titans, and Ymir and Atlas on the opposite side. We've been seeing a little bit more Atlas kind of pop up here, Gore.
Yeah, and honestly, it's what does he bring? Good CC, really good prot shred and get kind of control like that. So I feel like that's a good one to ban away. Plus the Titans, Aror, when it first came out, really liked playing Atlas. SOT really likes playing Atlas. So I think that's just a good one to ban off because it hits 2 people at once.
Like the late game that the Oni Warriors have started to build up for themselves here.
Battle approaching.
The Mercury and a Freya AMC. Khepri will be great for finding some control a bit earlier on in the game. And remember, Freya not like only late game oriented anymore.
No.
I mean, for a while it was simply late game, and that's what you've got. Still a good target to put behind. I mean, you can still say, all right, we are going to limit this Freya, but how often have we seen dual lane chosen as the lane that we're putting it behind? Hardly ever, if ever, during this Masters. We have left AD carries to sit and farm over in dual lane with maybe some purple buff pressure, maybe a gank here or there over the last 2 weeks. I think the Oni Warriors pretty unconcerned with Vote's ability to scale up on this Freya.
I mean, you say late game, and I think if you could drop these teams in, like what we say this with the EU SEC a lot, if you could just drop these guys, like these 2 rosters in 30 minutes, Warriors are just going to roll over. If everything's equal, builds are all equal, everything's fine, they have such a strong late game team fight. I mean, Muzen Cobb, Freya, and Mercury are just going to shred people. It's going to happen, and I think if you're a tank or if you're a squishy, if you're a rat, like anybody on this team, you should be worried about what they can do, especially with the CC, the healing, and then like knock-up stuff that comes from like Yemoja, comes from Chulainn, things like that, I think all kind of empower this team. But it's a lot harder to get to that because, like you said, even though not all of them are super late game oriented, in fact, AMC can farm incredibly well. Like the Morrigan is going to get out pressured just because he's going to clear the wave way better than her. Should be able to control that lane pretty easily. Same thing for Freya. Maybe it's not going to be better clear than Cupid, but Freya with a Yemoja, it at least has some fight back potential. So even though you're not clearing the wave faster, you're going to be able to deal a little bit of damage back. And like you said, isn't completely oriented, although you're still waiting on her to maybe come online. Mercury gets a little more muddy in the water, right? Like he can start getting active early.
Yeah.
But really, like we'll see Mercury's rush, sometimes it's been the Golden Blade lately, sometimes it's been directly into like a Rage, but it still takes a while. I think the Khepri and the AMC and to a certain extent the Yemoja are really like the pillars for the Warriors to lean on early. And since one of those is in mid, it feels like it'll at least keep them afloat to get to that late game part.
The Oni Warriors are going to need themselves to get a bounce back for game number 2 if they want a chance to move into game number 3. We'll hop right into the second game between the Oni Warriors and the Tartarus Titans to see who will come out on top. It's J-Mac, Dolson, and Goremizer here for the TriCast.
We have not talked about the TriCast.
Yeah, we just kind of threw it out there like, hey, by the way, we're all here, but yeah, a TriCast.
And they thought it was just a fancy disc.
They really did.
It is kind of. It
is a very fancy
desk, but it's also a TriCast. I like it. Hey, for the third place match. Oh my God.
Are you okay,
Third
Dave?
place match. We're having 3 casters on the game. I'm cool with that. That seems to track, right? 3 and 3.
Yeah.
Comedy comes.
Does that mean
in threes?
if we called this the 4th place match instead, that we should bring it. We need
Well,
to
our
get somebody
fourth
else.
is Doug.
Oh yeah, there you go.
There's
Doug
our
is
fourth.
with
The,
that-
the
so
third,
that's our
and then
third,
he's the fourth.
and then he's the
Yeah,
fourth.
nailed it.
There.
There you go.
We got to figure it out, and hopefully the Oni Warriors.
That's your thinking brain right there, dude.
The fact that we've been able
sometimes
to
I
keep
gotta
it on
turn it-
track with 3 of us on the cast,
It's pretty good.
that speaks volumes to our professionalism. And
I'm
let's-
here.
Can we talk about our professionalism for a moment and how, I don't know, I got nothing left in this bit. We're professional, and we did a good job in game number 1, and hopefully we can do a good job in game number 2. That's my analysis.
Dave, you know what? And I'm going to say I'm proud of you because I don't think I've ever heard you pat yourself on the back ever in the years that we've worked together.
No, I was the only one dragging us. You guys did it.
There it is. I was like, I've never heard Dave have anything, even like, you'll get off a cast and he'll say, yeah, it was a good cast. And he'll go, yeah, well, actually, we both do this, so I don't know if I can
I think
call
we
you
all
out
do
for
it a little bit.
I'm the worst.
We're all a little self-depreciating when it comes to our performances sometimes,
Have to.
but
also we're great.
You got to go into a cast feeling like you're the best there is, and then you leave a cast feeling like there's no one worse, right?
And if you don't cry at least twice during commentary review, then did you really do commentary review?
No, probably not. I cry at the sound of my own voice, though, so that's
That's usually what sparks it.
that's how it always ends up.
What was
going
that about
through.
us being professional?
I don't know.
Anyway.
out the window. But not out the window yet are the chances for the Oni Warriors. If they can find a win in game number 2, they can push this third place match to the full distance so far. And let me contextualize for the fans at home for week number 2. Day 1 was 4 best of 3s. 3 out of those go the full distance, so 11 out of our 12 games. Yesterday, 2 best of 5s. 1 of those goes the full distance, and the other one goes to 4. So out of the 22 games that we could have had in days 1 and 2, we've gone 20 of those.
My goodness.
By the way, that's also 20 sets that we did in the very first week of play. So a lot of Smite to get up to this point,
That's a
to
lot of
get
Smite.
to this best of 3 matchup for the Oni Warriors and Titans, to then get up to the best of 5 for the grand finals that'll happen after.
Doesn't week 1 feel so long ago now after all the Smite we've casted over the last
We had like
couple
a
of weeks?
4-day break in between it. It feels like
We did.
eternity.
It does, yeah, it feels like so long ago for some reason. That was a lot of fun having the SEC teams in here. Got some good matchups between those squads, some upsets, of course, with Hex Mambo moving on. There were a lot of fun storylines coming out of week 1, moving into week 2. And this would be a really nice one for the Titans, I think, specifically to complete their comeback at the end of Phase 2. We've talked plenty about how some of the creativity brought them high and low in Phase 2, and so ending Phase 2 with a nice third-place win would be nice for the squad, and nice for SOT to pick up a blue buff on the end.
I'm really excited to watch this specifically because I think the Titans have a much, just in general, a stronger early game, right? Like Nika, I think, can fight back into the Bellona, but Layers should be able to control a lot of the early levels compared to what a Mercury is going to be able to bring. So, like, jungle-wise, I think the Titans are going to be online a little bit more. Again, in mid, it kind of balances itself out because while Layers has an advantage over Qvo, Dardez has flying colors over Paul in terms of clear and control of the lane. A duo comes back and forth between the two of them. It just depends on who's standing, maybe too aggressively or vice versa. And so it really does create an awkward spot as well because, like, that means Layers, in my mind, has the easiest time to try and get aggressive, go for a gank. Amus and Cobb, you had highlighted it during Picks and Bans Day, probably the easiest one to choose to go on just because immobile.
Yeah, it's
And
gotta
if you
be.
get a good knock-up and it's not pre-beads by Dardez, theoretically the follow-up on that, even if it's from a Morrigan, now that Paul has ult, should be pretty easy to lock down.
I think that Dardez needs to keep eyes on Paul from level 5 for both Paul and Layers onward, because I mean, of course you can see, a Ratatoskr up onto the branches, you can kind of catch a glimpse, but there is total potential for Paul and Layers to just be MIA on the map, and then suddenly Dardez is being double jumped on if Paul just sneaks around the corner or something like that. Dardez has got to be hyper aware here in the mid lane when you've got the double dive potential of both Layers and Paul. So Paul hits level 6 before Dardez does, but QvoFred hits level 5 before Layers does, but now level 5 for both. But I also, the door also opens up heavily for QvoFred as well. And potentially some okay targets and moments like this. I don't, Sot's gonna go back, but it's the classic tier 1, charge up Sonic Boom, fly down the lane, at least get some beads. Because QvoFred, I mean, had some good moments in the team fights later on in game 1, but didn't have the big, like, early map pressure, let's get the ball rolling type of performance until the fights really started to break out. So I hope to see, especially with such big level 5 power spikes for both Mercury and Ratatoskr. I want to see Qvo and Layers getting active.
So far, a much quieter game number 2 than we had from our prior. It was much more scrappy, a lot of brawling happened in the early stages, even if kills didn't necessarily go any way, at least to start things out. But I think that does kind of play into maybe what you were talking about, Gore, with the late game of the Oni Warriors. I mean, this is a team, when you're looking at Freya, Mercury just in general, those are 30+ minutes, 6-slot item gods who are just going to kill anybody who walks in. So does that then bring it over to the Tartarus Titans to try and bring the fight early and make that late game a little bit worse for the Warriors?
Yeah, I think they have to try and get themselves ahead. I think if they go equal into a late game, Dardez, Vote, and Qvo just get to run the show. With the amount of CC and setup and space creation that the Warriors have from their front line, it becomes very easy to then just kind of choose a fight, choose an objective, choose a player, and kill them off. If, like, Khepri had been locked in for the Titans, maybe I'd be singing a different tune, but for now, I think it's good.
Oh no, the whoop from Vote actually stops the sonic boom from Qvo, but if anything, it allows Qvo to get back into the jungle and get out. So a little bit of miscommunication on who they wanted to go on there, if they wanted to fight or not. But at the end of the day, it's not too bad unless Layers can find a dunk. But with NeilMah and Vote so far back between the two towers, not going to make that initiation.
Qvo just wanted to ult without having a hit like pesky
Repositioning
Cupid. Yeah, he didn't want anything to do with the Cupid, right? And so Vote was just helping him out.
Yeah, just a second repositioning ult in the matter of the last couple minutes. Man, the Titans really want this purple buff. Should be able, I mean, if you're going to rotate Layers over here and you're going to keep Vote in lane if you're the Oni Warriors, you got to be able to drop that purple. And it looks like the Titans are able to do so. So now we've seen a couple ultimates out from the junglers respectively, neither of them really connecting, but at least showing that the option for pressure is there and should be taken. But Dardez, you know, Ghost Transcendence, what you expect on this AMC out of mid. I still just got to, I think if we get through this entire laning phase, and Dardez hasn't been ganked, had his beads burnt, anything like that, even just one time, that's a dropped ball from the Titans.
I agree, right? Because again, you have Rattle, it feels like it should be so easy to go and get over there. Maybe even a rotation from Sot. It might be a little early because of what you're asking for him, but I think just being able to get over there and have something like an Eagles rally onto someone like Dardez, if you force the beats there, makes it a lot easier to just be Layers and go forward. Now that Aror's joined the fray, though, I expect that we'll see some more action in mid. Again, he's got minion wave pressure, right? He's gonna out-clear you because it's on Muzen Cobb. We talked about it with the mids when they were here. Like Stinger, when it comes to fights, that's what you want him for, and then otherwise, it's the fact that no one is going to really out-clear you. No one's going to really control this lane better than you. If they do step up to you, you've got hard-hitting autos, like one of the hardest boxers in the game just for Muzen Cobb, plus your Hive augmentations, plus, again, that Stinger now that you're past level 5 to be able to kind of turn the tide in your favor. And I think it makes things more difficult here. Not necessarily for Paul, he's been farming fine, but like getting that engage, if you don't do it right with the forefront of CC, then it kind of falls flat on its face.
I was wondering if we'd see more pressure put on Vote in this dual lane when his beads got burned at the top end of that fight earlier on, because he used the Valkyrie's discretion when the Fields of Love came out. He used his beads immediately after because Aror had ulted him. But we haven't seen any pressure put back on him. Beads are up in 14 seconds, and instead, it's the Warriors looking to bring the fight to Layers. Ult is available, and he won't even get a chance to use it. QvoFred comes up with a first blood, maybe even finding a second as he dives to the backline against Cyclone. But with that heart bomb on top, he's not going to find that fight. Aror grabs the beads from the B in the mid lane. Qvo goes back in, finds the throw against Aror, but Aror turns it back around with the help of Paul, who has made his way over, and SOT has made his way to the fight. Where did the solo laner come from for the Tartarus Titans to find two?
Yeah, keep your eyes on the teleport. It's down. That's why Sot is over on the left side of the map.
And fully upgraded, not just down, he upgraded it so he could rotate faster. I mean, that's insane for him. And it gets him aggressive. I mean, look, I said Sot maybe making rotations. I thought it was too much to ask. That is a nuts teleport to go for.
It is, and look, I love that, but it's an important answer back from the Titans. Yeah. But it does open up the line of questioning now for the Oni Warriors, because onto a single target, and it's a risky run if you're Layers going blink early on the Rat. You want blink on Rat. But it's a risky run when NeilMah can hit you with the Riptide. QvoFred is there to toss you back as well, get some lockdown. So there's a lot of individual instances of lockdown for the Oni Warriors, and that's something the Titans are going to have to look to avoid. but chaining that together into a full team fight later on. So yes, you have all this scaling, but are you hoping that NeilMah can really layer on the CC? Are you hoping that QvoFred is hitting these big sonic booms? Nika's got to find big, team-wide knockups versus Eagles Rally for AoE stuns. Layers with AoE knockups, though. Nika has that as well. Paul can double up on any of it. Aror with the Whirlwind of Rage and Steel, great at beads burning. Fields of Love from CycloneSpin. More individual passive lockdown potentially from the Oni Warriors compared to big AoE hard CC from the Titans a bit later on in the game. So I think there are going to be some forces battling it out over the course of the next 15 or so minutes.
And then it becomes, I think, like a conversation deep of like damage and damage dealt in this little bit of time. I'll be honest, I did not expect First Blood of all things to go to like the Mercury. I think that, the Titans, especially because they get the punch back they would have liked, but like losing Layers, a little unfortunate. I feel like he's going to be the one that early on, at least in my mind, was going to be the essential point for them to lean on. But now that they're, coming around this level 12 mark, Freya's still not necessarily in a great spot, right? You want not just the next ring that Vote's going for, but probably one more on that before you get to see like true damage Freya. But, with the Rage now online for Qvo, you are going to be able to get hit and you're going to be able to get aggressive. In fact, you almost have to because you want those Rage stacks. That plus a fully stacked Transcendence now for Dardez, ults being available. I feel like we've kind of entered the awkward phase where it's slowly transitioning towards the Warriors. They're definitely going to be able to have some strengths over the Titans in a lot of these fights, but it's not necessarily like a gimme for them. But I think if they can continue on this kind of pathing, the window of ease for the Titans is going to close, right? The opportunity will still be there. It's just how easily they can actually enact it.
You bring up Rage, and I always have to bring up the Spectral Armor when Rage is brought up. Love it from Aror here. Super early on in his build. Early prevention from Aror as far as crits go from QvoFred. Not a bad mindset. Look, because a stray crit here or there can ruin your day. Aror is going to try to smooth that over. Love the build path here from the Xing Chen.
Now, if I'm not mistaken as well, there is two forms of anti-crit in the game now. We have the Spectral Armor, which has been a long-standing one.
Are there really, though?
And then Paul gets hit by an ultimate, transforms into the Ratatoskr. The double rat damage is good to take down QvoFred, who went a little too far forward. And where will Paul crash back down? It is in towards the jungle. So another pick for the Tartarus Titans. Oni Warriors losing their jungler again, definitely going to put a hurt on them.
And Dave, you had mentioned the Rage, and seeing that play happen out the way it did, I think it has to go back to some of the games we've seen where Rage has been picked up on a Mercury super early, and it just straight up hasn't gotten stacks at all. Like, I mean, we've seen it happen, and it hurts to watch it, and I have to imagine it hurts to experience. And granted, there's still a lot of game to be played for Qvo, but there's a disturbing precedent that has been set prior to this that I think will maybe cause some trouble, or at least cause some trepidation from myself at looking at it. I think you get to see some of the difficulties with engage. Beads are down now for Paul, so like an ult like that is going to be a lot easier to make happen. Mercury ult should be back up way before Morrigan ult as well. So there's definitely another option coming up soon to get a gank up against Paul for Qvo that would probably be a lot more commanding and a lot more domineering. And I think the other thing that has to be talked about with the Mercury is what we just saw in mid and how that engage happens, because not pretty much anybody else can gank you while they're just in your lane already. Like, for Layers on the Rat, even a Thor like with a dunk, most of the time you're ulting somewhere outside of the lane into the lane to try and get that control. Merc can go from tier 1 to tier 1, and he can do it in the blink of an eye. He can go from a really long shot just behind the tier 1 in mid to just about the tier 1 in mid. So he can get a lot of distance, a lot of gap closure, and I think that's something that can definitely catch the Titans off guard. I mean, they've played against Mercury a lot, but it's a different style that you have to play up against now, as opposed to like a Blink Hunbats or something like the Pele. He can just kind of be anywhere he wants if Qvo has ult.
And it's so odd just to see the Oni Warriors being the ones to try and make these super proactive and hyper-aggressive plays like with QvoFred. I mean, this is a team, and we've harped on it so far, the entirety from picks and bans up until now, that this is a team that wants to get to late game. This is a team that wants to find those 25, 30-minute full slot kind of fights where they're at least even or maybe ahead. But they're the ones who are constantly trying to force these plays in less favorable positions, like we saw over in mid. But now we're going to see them make one over at least towards CycloneSpin or Aror, since he is caught out. Aror will go for the ult, picks up just QvoFred to throw him back. But this should be a death onto Aror, stepped a little too far forward. The support will be punished, but maybe the counter rotation now. From the Tartarus Titans, NeilMah will throw up the rivers to disengage for himself. But that should be the call for the Titans to lead, because now QvoFred is back in, CycloneSpin gone, and SOT grabbed, will have to use the beads, can't even make it back to the tower with all the CC available. He will make it through, no further aggression from the Warriors.
That is the definition of a swing and a miss from the Tartarus Titans, and the Oni Warriors able to capitalize on it. Where Layers gets the dunk down, doesn't end up hitting a stun onto NeilMah. Aror actually in a decent position on the Whirlwind of Rage and Steel. On the back end of this though, the Oni Warriors have the footing to pick up the Gold Fury.
Maybe more with it. SOT Stinger lands on him, a jump in by Nika, but SOT has just a little too much health and a little too much distance. The Oni Warriors don't find the pick on the solo laner, but they do find the Gold Fury and spikes that one back up their way. XP still in favor of the Titans, but gold just ever so slightly up for the Warriors.
I think we got to see maybe the best showcase. No layers. He's going to try to go in. Vote's going to have to go up into the ult to stay alive.
Paul bursted down to jump in. One more shot from Nika will do it. Paul can't find the stun. Layers finds a path on out, but NeilMah will make sure to keep Aror locked down once again. The support is completely isolated from the rest of his team with 5 people there. No chance that Aror makes it out. It's Dardez who finds the kill.
That is a terrifying picture. All 5 members of the Oni Warriors walking towards Aror, who's got ultimate, yes, but not much of a chance. This is an unbelievable pace now from the Oni Warriors. So yes, it's just one big team fight, but it's a misstep from the Titans that have now given this late game composition a pretty big gold lead, a tier 1 tower, a Gold Fury, and what maybe should be a tier 2 tower as long as the Oni Warriors stick on it. But watch out, Layers is rotating in behind. No, he's not.
No, he's not.
Yeah,
He'll stay.
and
He'll
honestly,
watch.
I think he has to be careful, right? Because
Yeah, you don't want to jump
what
in
we've
there.
seen against Aror now twice, and anybody else, although everybody else hasn't gotten the full brunt of it, single target damage from the Warriors is insane.
Right.
I mean, they will just kill you outright. Luckily for them, well, half lucky and maybe not so much. One is that the stinger, the last stinger of that fight, didn't get picked up, so it took a little bit of time for it to come back. Bad news, it's back, so it is still something that is to deal with. And that's the real downside of this, right? If you land in front of Dardez, and Dardez has anybody else, they're fine to fight.
Big engage from Qvo and Nika. Not enough damage to Layers. He'll be able to jump out, but can SOT jump out? Eagles Rally available, and no further jump in from the Oni Warriors. No one else can get over that wall. So the Tartarus Titans do get the Pyromancer.
Yeah.
They do get to live, but it costs them a couple of big ultimates to do so.
Yeah, it's just a net win from the Titans for now, if you're able to get the Pyromancer. But it does, it slows down what you're able to do on the rest of the map. Using all these ultimates defensively still gives positional advantage to the Oni Warriors, who are going to try to make use of it. And unfortunately, what I was talking about earlier is now actually starting to come to fruition, where I said if Dardez escapes this laning phase without getting his beads burnt, or even looked at once for a gank, you're on an AMC going up against a Morrigan and a Ratatoskr. One stealth into a stun, into a dunk in, and anything. I wanted to see beads off of Dardez at least once, and it just hasn't been the case. The Warriors have done a great job at fighting away from the mid lane. They've pulled the Titans out of an area where they would be able to jump on a Dardez. They've been fighting over on the left side of the map, and so Dardez just hasn't been in the area where he's under the most threat of receiving a lot of this pressure. And so now 2-0-2 on AMC, fully stacked Transcendence, well underway into his build. Love the Crusher pickup and the Brawler's Beat Stick for a little of the sustain. You spread out the honey and the bees, you're going to be able to get some good anti-heal coverage over onto the Tartarus Titans as well. All about single target lockdown. QvoFred in with his ultimate, just disrupting a bit of what the Tartarus Titans are hoping to do. Where again, on the flip side, it feels like kind of AoE initiation for the Tartarus Titans. And those are the two forces that I was talking about battling it out. Warriors are way ahead of schedule here as far as their composition goes.
I'm also really surprised to see that the Titans, knowing that they're going to be playing into a lot of auto attackers, it makes sense to maybe try and play against it. But they only have the one shell on CycloneSpin right now. And again, single target damage, you can see it onto Aror. Holy smokes, it's just way too much to deal with in certain circumstances. I'm starting to think, you know, we saw that Witchblade. I wanted to come back. Like, I'm starting to need it. Shogun's Kusari could be really good for the Warriors. I don't know if it plays well with Nika, so maybe something later. Oh, no, Neil already has it.
Yep.
So perfect, because Neil also benefits from having faster autos because he can get some small heals, but still heals
so
out
good,
nonetheless. It just feels really solid for, I think, everybody on this team to be itemizing the way they are. I want a Horrific. Do they have a Horrific over there? No.
No, nothing yet. No Horrific to be
And no
picked up
chance.
either, because
Yeah.
everybody's relics have been bought now. Tier 1 tower goes down to the Trebuchet in mid. Tartarus Titans not able to defend up against that one. Aurora's just been bullied every opportunity. He has stepped within 55 units of the enemy team. The Oni Warriors, especially NeilMah, has been able to find these Riptides to pull him back in. Vote's been able to find these Banishes to lift him up and drop him immediately into a Stinger afterward. So for the Tartarus Titans, these little scraps that they've been taking, you know, trying to funnel in one at a time up against the Oni Warriors hasn't worked in lane. But how does their team fight kind of play out once you start getting around some of these more objective-based plays, Gore?
Honestly, I'm going to be real with you. They've already taken away some of the things that I really wanted to deal with, some of the plays that the Warriors are going to make.
Whoa.
Although, hey, that's a good start. Kill off Qvo. And that usually balances some things out. The downside is you can't be alone.
Hello.
And Nika's going to go for more?
CycloneSpin, pressured out. Ultimate is good by Nika to hold him for a little while. And the rest of the team is slowly moving in. Nika transforms, misses the ultimate on that, but finds the root, gets the beads, gets the shell. And this 1v1 matchup is just going all towards Nika. I'm not even sure if Dardez actually got an auto in there. So a solo kill for Nika. SOT teleports in, realizes that Nika is on the other side of the Phoenix. And Nika is going to take a lot longer to go through that door. Will jump away from SOT, but with Paul here, Nika should go down to SOT.
Yeah, a bit too deep at 21 minutes. We're going under the Phoenix line, but Nika is able to run down CycloneSpin. What does that open up? It's a potential team fight now around this Primal Fury. I think the Oni Warriors, with where their strengths are right now, happy to keep both QvoFred, Dardez, and Neil on the map in exchange for CycloneSpin dropping off the face of the earth from the Tartarus Titans. Won't end up going over to the Primal Fury, but... And look, that's a Nika feeling himself moment, and I'm never going to fully harsh on that. I mean, if you have the opportunity to just run at CycloneSpin, make the play happen, and then nearly get out alive, take your swing of the bat. Yeah. He hits like a double. You know, he's not out yet, but he got to second base there with his hit. Not a bad play from Nika.
Not only that, I have to give him like extra credit just because even though you died, that salmon leap to avoid the Eagles rally was like really,
nice.
like that was just a cute play. So, I mean, like zoned in, playing well, and even if it loses you your life in that moment, it's not even that big of a gold lead. In fact, like you know, it feels like the Warriors are dominating this, but they're not really as of right now. It's just been a lot of good damage as of late. I'm curious of what the 5-on-5 is going to look like. I think they've got a lot of shred potential on their side, but the team fight potential, I think, is still stronger for the Titans in terms of big AoEs.
Roar picks up Neil, who held on to his beads. Even through that ultimate, Nika will get a lot of poke thrown towards him, about 40% of his health. But the Fury does go over to the Tartarus Titans, able to find an objective for themselves. Finally get back in this game, kind of slow down the pacing that the Warriors had established. Earlier on, it was the Warriors trying to go for these very hyper-aggressive plays, trying to make kind of force a fight to happen, what we saw in the mid lane. And then the Tartarus Titans kept kind of going in one by one over on the left side. Aror keeps trying to find these ultimates onto 2 or 3 people, comes up empty-handed usually, was getting picked out. But now the Titans have slowed things down once again. They've kind of forced the Warriors to go back into the pacing that the Tartarus Titans want. And this is a perfect pit for the Tartarus Titans. They can grab Neil right through the wall. They will go up into the sky. Is both Layers and Paul. They will separate out and divide and conquer on the team fight. Paul finds Neil, and Layers will at least distract QvoFred, get the beads off the jungler.
Nika now the one being chased down, and Paul snags a double. 1 kill is the Ratatoskr, 1 on the Morrigan. And a really nice play from the Tartarus Titans, who, by the way, were even going into that team fight, despite being down 2,000 or so gold a couple minutes ago. Get the Primal Fury, get the Pyromancer, a nice pick on to CycloneSpin, opens up so much of the map. And when we were talking about chase down and concern around team fight, the Oni Warriors can burst down a single target. But the Titans fighting their game right now.
Oh my god, Aurora's just gone. Vote is doing too much damage. Dardez gone as well, but a couple crits from QvoFred will turn it back. This is a 3v5 going into this fight. Well, now it's only going to be one left alive. Does Vote have the damage to kill 3 more? Aegis is gone. Vote finds the banish onto SOT. And then a Riptide from Neil to bail him out. And again, going into that fight, that was just the damage dealers of the Warriors versus the full force of the Titans. The fact they go 2 for 2 to that trade, pretty impressive by the Warriors.
Honestly, I'm impressed because Cuvo, if he lives, I mean, it's not just 2 for 2. Like even one more second. If Sut doesn't get that Scourge the minute he does, that's another kill. Cyclone, that I see the crit, the auto, like he's rearing back for the punch. And unfortunately, the Scourge just comes down and stops him right before it happens. It had enough damage to get the kill. Even if not, it would have silenced him and probably bought enough time there. But if Sat's like 10 more units away, that's another kill for him, and it swings things maybe a little more in their favor. You don't lose a Pyromancer. You don't lose a lot of the pressure. But now we're starting to see where the downsides of the Warriors draft is, and a lot of that is built based on Neil at the beginning of it getting picked, right? If Neil is involved in the fight, you've got the CC, you've got the lockdown for your team to be able to continue engagements and things like that. If Neil gets picked off, it all falls through the roof, right? That you've got a bunch of single target dudes that can't survive on their own. Nika was also relatively low early on in that. So like your front line was just missing. It was really up to Cuvo, Dardez, Vote, all of their damage to try and make something happen. And you know, when you're Cuvo and you have to go in as deep as you do, or if you're Dardez and you don't have the mobility or safety that you do, then no front line is just a bad scenario.
I mean, Cuvo's fully stacked his Rage. He's gotten it there. I mean, the door for damage, right, is still absolutely open for the Oni Warriors. This game's still very, very close. But it's going to require QvoFred to do a bit of this. Flanker on the backside, find a pick, give your team an advantage.
Vote being jumped on by SOT, but Vote's not losing a whole lot of HP. The heals from NeilMah will keep him alive. Double ult from Nika and a Fields of Love to lock him in. Eagles Rally finds 3 by SOT, and up on the tree with the Ratatoskr dunks in on top of Dardez. Layers wants the pick, but Paul has found one. Layers has found another. Nika still battling for his life, but Cuvo finds a big crit onto Layers. That will take down the Rat, but Cuvo gets traded out right in return. Nika, who's lived through this entire fight, will be the second to last one to go down. Only NeilMah left alive, and all the Tartarus Titans will push in to try and take out this Yemoja. No chance that NeilMah makes it out. It's a triple for Paul, a deicide for the Titans.
Look, that's just a beautiful engage into an easy follow-up team fight. The minute you go forward, and it starts out with this, right? It's the pressure. It's not even the big ult at the beginning. It's just some damage on the Vote, and the lack thereof of anything returning. He has no penetration, nothing to really deal with someone like Sot, and so it makes it a lot easier for the Titans to just go, oh, cool, we'll jump on you. Unless Dardez was there peeling some prots for him, Vote's damage numbers, while they are the top in terms of player damage, did not do enough in that fight against the frontliners themselves. And unfortunately, that costs them a lot of pressure there, then a fight, then some lives, and now a lot more than that, right? Including the Phoenix now going up to the Fire Giant. I think that that's just a really good engage from the Titans, and better yet, just a good vibe check to make sure that they weren't going to take too much damage. That's been a problem that we've seen with the ring build time and time again, is where's this, like, where, outside of the straight, just stringent power numbers, where are you getting any penetration? And unless it's right now off the back of the Amus and Cobb, the answer is none.
Yeah, it's got to be Dardez and AMC. Look, I think ultimately you see the downfall of some of the draft here from the Oni Warriors in the sense that I was fully bought in on late game damage and keeping that door open, right? Shred, although some of the downfalls of the builds that you talk about there, Gore, absolutely present. But what really stands out to me in that Fire Giant fight is Nika jumping in, gets a nice double knock-up on some priority targets from the Titans.
Yeah.
And then CycloneSpin simply drops Fields of Love and then backs away. So it's like the kill secure from the Oni Warriors not strong enough to deal with what the Titans are punching back with. Cyclone gets jumped on, I'm going to drop Fields of Love. I'm going to prevent anyone from the Oni Warriors from following up on this initiation from Nika. Where on the flip side, Layers, we've talked about it, Layers can dunk in, Paul can transform, Paul can dunk in, Paul can stealth, and there's not enough dispelling from the Oni Warriors to prevent the Tartarus Titans from running down the individual targets of the Onis, unless you get a nice River's Rebuke from Neil, some Riptide, some stuns, plenty of areas of lockdown, but Titans team fight has just looked so strong.
Yep.
It's not like the Titans don't have late game damage either, right? I mean, there's plenty of scaling, yes, for the Oni Warriors, but late game Cupid, Ratatoskr for layers now hits a Heart Seeker, so burst damage onto the characters who are supposed to be staying alive from the Oni Warriors. I mean, being delivered for free. You go up onto your branch, you dump into the back line, and then suddenly Vote is just getting evaporated by layers in his build. So there's still plenty of damage for the Titans to have too.
SoloOrTroll has been a major thorn in the Oni Warriors' side between that Scourge that stops 3 different members from being able to really get any of that damage out, from the Triple Eagles rally in that last team fight that completely turns the tides of the fight for the Tartarus Titans. The Oni Warriors do have a little bit of help, or I should say the Tartarus Titans have a little bit of help coming their way with the Trebuchet. So for the Oni Warriors, Gore, where's the pick that they need to find in this fight to try and break at least this front line that the Titans have?
Man, if you can burn Sot the minute he tries to go in, that's probably going to be one of the easiest things for you. Nice Riptide there, almost connects, and I think that's something they have to be worried about, is Neil pulling someone into their demise. I also think like just farm and gold, you know, we see the tier 1, the magic focus there. I think a pick for Vote to get some pin on an op shard could be huge for them. Otherwise, it's a little bit of damage. They might have been able to pick up Aror with that positioning there. They're all playing a little cautiously. I think you have to choose your target well, because if you just kill off Aror and burn him down, yes, it's a 5v4, but you never know what the follow-up after that is going to be, especially depending on the investment. So you have to play this carefully. I think both for the Titans, because if one person goes in at the wrong time, it's a very easy pickup for the Warriors. But also for the Warriors, because, you know, Mercury is off on the other side. Yeah, his ult can come over there and maybe help you out a lot, but realistically, you're kind of spread thin. And it's just how much damage can you get down onto someone like Sot or Aror without having those huge crit numbers.
Players is up.
Players is down. Doesn't find anything on a QvoFred. Paul was up, and Paul is down. And so is the right side Phoenix. The double dunk in by the Ratatoskrs. The double dash out by the Ratatoskrs. So the Tartarus Titans will not come up empty-handed, at least in this Phoenix Siege. They're able to take down the bird that had respawned itself in. But it doesn't really seem like they're going to get much more than that. Everybody else on the Warriors has spread themselves out to make sure they can find something. Riptide nearly takes down CycloneSpin, but a quick beads gets him out. The Tartarus Titans not very healthy to try and go back in this fight.
I have to imagine if Qvo has ult, he's going towards CycloneSpin almost immediately there, who got stunned and some damage taken out. I mean, think about it. It's like 1 or 2 punches from QvoFred, but had to use his ultimate while being dove by Layers and Paul. It's got to be about target isolation on Phoenix defense for the Oni Warriors. The jump in from Layers and Paul against just one allows them to kind of do that, but if Layers jumps to the back line and Neil is able to throw up a good wall, and Vote hits a good whoop, those are the types of things that'll give the Oni Warriors an okay look at a defense. But when the Titans are able to spread out the map so effectively, knock down one more Phoenix, it's a great look at a Siege, and they'll go into this next Fire Giant pretty handedly ahead. Power potions rolling in. And one of the major advantages for Neil is this River's Rebuke. I talked about target isolation. That's now missing a bit because CycloneSpin has just now upgraded his shell to a Phantom shell. So if Neil is somehow dashed on by CycloneSpin, or more likely is able to wall off CycloneSpin, or anyone else that's around Cyclone, wall's a bit less impactful. One more chance for the Oni Warriors to grab 3rd place.
Handsfire started up, melting down quickly, and ult in the back line by QvoFred. Doesn't find a kill yet. The River's Rebuke will separate the fight, but CycloneSpin is committing to the Fire Giant. The Oni Warriors will steal that one away. Vote has already found 1 pick, making a double kill for the Freya. Nika goes in to try and stop Paul and has isolated the mid laner away from the fight. SOT being turned on by this Freya, but Aror is making sure that Vote does not have the DPS to take down the solo laner. But meanwhile, Paul might be going for a backdoor attempt. Surely gets spot out by the Hive there, and now the rest of the Oni Warriors on their way to stop it. But can Paul even make it out of this? Will walk through the jungle to find Nika. Nika really wants to find this pick.
I almost had him to knock him out of that. I don't know if you get aggressive into this into 2. No, that's going to do too much damage.
That's a lot of damage towards Nika. Thanks to that, delivered by Paul. And Aror comboing up there. But Tartarus Titans make the best out of a bad situation. I mean, they lost 2 to vote almost instantly in that fight.
Yeah, how'd that fight go wrong? I mean, the Oni Warriors, I thought QvoFred had lost the fight for the Oni Warriors. He ults into the back around that enhanced fire giant. Remember, this is an enhanced fire giant that the Oni Warriors now have. I thought Qvo, I mean, dead to rights, gets taken out. I'm thinking that's it. But on the flip side of the fight, it's what we were concerned about on Phoenix defense, or Phoenix Siege maybe for the Titans, where Layers dunks in. He's alone. And guess what? You're there. You're now at late game shred style of damage for the Oni Warriors, and you're just, it simplifies at that point. It's damage trades. Layers loses out on the damage trade. So really both junglers in the dive gets answered by either team. And it simplified to the point where the Oni Warriors were like, all right, we don't care about your AoE. We don't care about your team fight. This is full-on damage shred time. We can run you down. Now, it's not a full deicide, anything like that, but healthy enough in their targets, in that single target type of fighting, that the Oni Warriors, and really the big difference is a great wall from Neil, not onto any character, but onto the fire giant, keeps it leashed and allows the Oni Warriors to pick it up.
And Cyclone had a split-second decision there to make when that wall comes up, because it was, do you commit to the fire giant, which they tried to, or fall back? And I think if you fall back and let that one go, even if the Warriors get it, you're probably in a better position to keep the fight going because you have your damage dealers. Now, I mean, you still have an advantage. It's not like everybody got the fire giant on the other side, so there's some control. If you can get a pick onto someone like Neil, or at least keep this Phoenix weakened, then you're going to be feeling pretty solid about it. But for the Titans right now, like, this play and everything over the next couple of minutes is more or less just descriptive as a power play kill. Like, that's all they want to do. They just want to buy another, minute and a half to make sure that there's nothing the Warriors can get done. Map-wise, it's really just like, can we keep our Phoenixes alive? Because we're getting close to that state, or actually probably already in that state. 36 minutes in, one team fight is really going to be all it takes. Especially, like, if the Warriors get even 2 people, they can start stepping up to these objectives. They've got so much in terms of tower killing potential that I think that they have to be worried about it if they're the Titans. So cautious approaches to some of these fights is what I would expect to see. But I like how aggressive the Titans are at the same time.
Watch out for Dardez, and watch out for Nika. Got the 2-man knockup.
But a big sonic boom in the backline by QvoFred at least slows down the fight. Nika goes back in, but up on the tree for both the Ratatoskrs. The dunk gets 1 set of beads from Qvo. The other dunk is just to get away. Stinger down. SOT is low, but Eagles rally in the middle of 3 of them. Aror cannot pick up anybody with his own ultimate. And in this skirmish, the health bars are much better for that of the Warriors because Dardez has found Paul with the help of the bees. QvoFred will throw Aror back, and that could be a pick on the support. Stinger is back up for Dardez, and Aror is back down on the Titans.
My goodness, the initiation from the Titans was just not good enough to win the team fight. It's the same thing that happened around the Fire Giant 2 minutes ago. The Oni Warriors don't get immediately killed by the Titans on the jump in, and then the fight simplifies. It is single target, run you down, burn damage, and the Oni Warriors have a look at a win here in game 2.
Starting up the siege at the Phoenix. 30 seconds till Paul, 40 until Aror. In a 5v3 situation, the Warriors are willing to take this battle. No ults up, except for Layers, who just got his. Dardez has the Stinger back and available. The Titan has been pulled. Nika being chunked back. Layers up on the tree, but the damage of the Oni Warriors is massive. A whoop is good from Vote. The Titan is low, and once again, the team who is thousands of gold down wins one team fight. 35 plus minutes in the game, and it's the Oni Warriors now taking us to game 3.
And a lot of that one is exactly what you call, right? It's that kill, that pick immediately. I'd said it before, if you get 2 kills, that's easily a Phoenix. Whether or not you can get more than that was kind of going to be up in the air to me, but with all of that single target damage, the ult usages from the Titans to try and get something started there, to try and win that game, it feels like if the Titans had played maybe a little more passively instead of as aggressive as they did, you just burn out that Fire Giant, and then you're setting up, and we're talking about the next one right now. But instead, they try to get aggressive, most of their ults don't connect, and they end up in a worse spot because of it. Then all of a sudden, it's a resurgence from the Warriors. Yeah, their ults are nice, but that's not where a majority of their damage comes from, so they were just easily able to walk forward and burn them down.
Couple of nice picks from the Oni Warriors, net them 1 team fight and 1 win. We're going to game 3. That comes up right after this break.
I win? What did it win?
You win the respect.
You're telling me an alien wore this?
Perfect. Okay.
Okay, that was a good cut.
Messaging him to mute.
The best graphics you really need, Ultra, of course, and I can probably watch a stream on the side.
Content's gonna look good.
Pretty good, pretty good.
This is so weird and so unnecessary. Look how we both got real good at burning bridges. Yeah, we're both strange but so different, baby. I think it's over now. Is it over now? Is it over? Is it over?
Oni Warriors down 10,000 plus gold, able to bring this game back and tie up our set. And well, as you can tell, our players are unfortunately having to play at home due to everything going on right now. But the good news is that they're playing on their Alienware PCs provided to all of our players, not just in the studio, but in the comfort of their homes. So that way they don't have to change up their gameplay. They don't have to change up the technology and the builds that they are running on those machines. Make sure to go to SMITEGame.com/Alienware. Use code AWSMITE09 to check out the gear that our pros are playing on over in their home offices, their bedrooms, wherever the heck it may be, that they are actually playing on those machines. The Aurora Ryzen 10 desktops, the 24-inch 240Hz gaming monitors as well. Thank you so much to Alien for coming back in Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League. Check them out over at Alienware on both Instagram and Twitter, and go to AlienwareArena.com to see what other great offers Alienware has for you at home. Game number 2, another case of one single team fight is all it takes to turn the tides of a game. In game number 1, it was the Titans finding picks inside the jungle at Fire Giant. This time for the Oni Warriors, it's finding 2 kills at a botched engage around the mid Phoenix. They're able to run up the mid lane and close out the game, Gore.
Yeah, I think that it's a lot of just single target damage, and when the ults were down from the Titans, the thing that helped them fight back maybe the strongest, all of a sudden it was much easier to then just forward, right? A very, very easy follow-up, and admittedly kind of back and forth, right? For like the part of the early game / mid game, it feels like the Warriors are winning engagements despite not really getting that much of a gold lead. And then the Titans, in a spot that I honestly thought it was going to be the Warriors' game to run away with, they started picking it up to the point where it almost has to be a massive gap between when the last fight of the Warriors that felt truly successful happens and they actually win the game.
Yeah, I want to... Because that was the big moment right there, that 33-minute team fight. Where it really feels like the game is sealed, though it is pretty even as far as numbers go. Of course, you got to shout out Nika diving the Phoenix at the 20-minute mark. This is how the early of this game felt, where Nika's feeling good about diving the Phoenix, and then it tilts back where the Titans suddenly reassert that mid-game point where their team fight just felt so strong. And then this is the last fight in the game, if I remember correctly, or towards the last fight of the game, where the engagement was the big advantage that the Titans had. The double Ratatoskr, I mean, Eagles rally, Aror, everyone had some form of lockdown. And in many cases, for Paul, double instances of lockdown that just missed in that final team fight of the game. And if you're in a straight-up damage battle at the end of the game, I'm always going to take the team with a Mercury, an AMC, a Freya. Every day of the week.
Yeah.
And so, I said it a lot on the cast. I think it simplifies for the Oni Warriors. If you can avoid this hyper-initiation from the Titans and calm the game down to where you're just boxing, you're going to win the boxing matches.
And I know because, Vote doesn't end it at top damage, but for a long time in that game was the top damage. And one of the things that I'd highlighted in the fight, like the first fight they had lost, early in that late game was like, it's got no penetration. Like, Sot jumps forward, and that was it. That was like, you just had a Bellona in your face, and you couldn't do anything. When the Phoenix Sieges start, he's got tier 2 over there. By the time they get that last fight, he's got the full Obsidian Shard online, and suddenly he's dealing a lot more damage to the people that are trying to step up against him.
Yep, good point.
Well, we'll see if any change-ups get made in our third and final game of this best of 3 between the Oni Warriors and the Tartarus Titans. Picks and bans ready to go to see which team is going to come out on top. Which team is going to hold at least the 3rd place crown amongst these squads? Titans will take that first pick slot. And funny enough, so far, this Morrigan pick that has been so crucial for both of these mid laners has ended up going onto the losing side of these matchups. So maybe we see if that Morrigan even makes it onto a draft this time around. Tartarus Titans will make sure to keep up at least similar bans they've had in their previous games, starting out with this Dodgy, taking that one away from QvoFred.
Yeah, it's hard because... obviously, Morrigan has been playing very well, but there's just too much value in the first 6, I think, to ban the Morrigan away. I mean, Paul had a really nice game, even in a loss in Game 2 on the Morrigan. So I don't think the Oni Warriors threaten enough. You could take Cupid away. I don't know if you're banning Cupid, though, but CycloneSpin is really good at that pick. Again, even in a loss. Had a really good game, too. E-set. And so heavy mage bans across the table here between Dardez and Paul on either side.
Lancelot.
And then a shot at Vote. Actually, maybe double shot at Vote if you're looking at the side, and even though it's a mage. Vote has really been playing that pick a good bit. So Vote is the one taking a bit of the heat here in the van phase. I think smart, because Freya, again, as we've talked about, has smoothed out some of that scaling curve a bit better earlier on in the game. Looked really nice for Vote. One of the big reasons the Oni Warriors were able to grab themselves a win.
I lead us
I don't
to
know,
glory,
Morrigan.
to victory.
It's a death sentence in this set. You're guaranteeing yourself to lose if you pick the Morrigan, apparently. Oni Warriors maybe not dissuaded by that.
What's interesting to me is that this is like, outside of it being a Freya and not an Muzen Cobb, this is pretty much the exact same way Game 1 picks and bans went. I mean, in terms of picks, it is. And it's just that one little shift, I think, that we were seeing. It's also interesting to see after something that I think was maybe more successful. Like you said, the Morrigan hasn't necessarily looked bad, but I think the Muzen Cobb was wonderful for the Warriors.
Yeah.
And now you're either locking that over for Vote in the next pick, or just not going to have it for your team, right? So I think that there's something that was successful, is helpful, that is maybe going to fall flat there. This was, I think, Cupid Olorun in game number 1. But I like this way more. Khepri, I think, like, you know, we've been seeing Yemoja, and I think she's still incredibly potent. But that res is just such a pain to have to deal with, and I think that that's going to level up the Titans for a lot of these team fights.
I feel like Khepri's got one of the most intimidating voices. Do you think Khepri's got the most intimidating?
I don't know. That one, Xing Chen's pretty intimidating when I hear that one.
There's something about the gravitas of Khepri's.
Khepri is the most godlike voice I would describe. Like, if I heard that voice, it like just like speaking to me and booming in the sky, I'm like, oh, okay, like you are all powerful. Like I am scared of you, Khepri.
Agreed.
And then he comes out and he goes,
right, which is why it's surprising, right?
Although his teeth are really unnerving.
Yeah, he does. He does have
razor sharp.
Ugh, every time I look at it, I get chills because you never think about the fact that this is a scarab beetle that has a
lot of bugs
giant
have
set
mouths.
of teeth.
I don't know if people know that. The bugs do got mouths though.
A lot of things in general have mouth score.
They need to eat.
He's got little chompers, bro.
But Ymir on the opposite side for the Oni Warriors, and this is something that brings
Ymir
up maybe
also has
an interesting conversation. The fact that Ymir seems to be kind of the answer to Khepri as of recent. You throw a wall up and Khepri has nowhere to go. You look at what else is around the Khepri so far. Feels like NeilMah may have gotten a perfect pick in the support role over for the Oni Warriors. And as we jump into the bans, Olorun, Cucullin, and Hun Bat's taken away. So it takes out some of the options that the Oni Warriors could have had for their double target. Nemesis still up, as well as Pele. That was something that QvoFred went to at the beginning of the set. But will not get it this time around. And Dave, how do you kind of feel about this Ymir against the Titans comp?
Actually, yeah, I'm glad you go back to that because, yes, I agree. I think it's good to the Khepri. But also look at what a lot of the Titans want to do already. There are dashes in or dashes out for all three of the Titans so far. And Ymir stifles that. I mean, Lancelot gets blocked off by Ymir Wall a good bit. Cupid can get blocked off by Ymir Wall a good bit, and so does Khepri. So I love this Ymir pick from NeilMah. These games have seemed to be guaranteed to go late. We've gone close to 40 minutes in both of them. And so when you're getting to the point where the game gets more narrow in these jungle fights, fire giant fights, potentially even earlier on if Neil is rotating out of lane, I love this Ymir pick as far as stifling, aggressive, or retreat from the Tartarus Titans. I think it should be, and hopefully is a really great pick.
Well, and it's this pick that now it either forces a relic, at least for the choices from the Titans, either forces a relic or your duo lane is just left out to dry, or it doesn't, and you just get the blatant advantage of it. I think in game 1, those walls were just phenomenal. And again, you know, Lancelot technically has the capabilities to get over it, but it's going to be a little bit longer to do so. So there's a lot of time to CC someone like a Lancelot before they can get over the wall. And if they do lock in something like the tier, I think last time the game 1 it was Tian and Ganesha, which you know would be.
We're not going Ganesha.
I was going to say not going to see that one either way. You're still getting another person on this team
Lightning bolt
that will not be able to get over that wall unless they commit something heavy to do so.
Yeah, flickers needed from Merlin, Lawbringer from Tier. Yeah, well, I mean, remember.
Justice shall be done.
I don't want to get too in the weeds with it, but it was really around that pause and kind of breather in game 1 where the Oni Warriors lost their footing against this team. It feels like the Oni Warriors had, and according to Dardez, happy, standing up, rubbing his hands together, had an answer to the tier, because remember, it was such a coin flip whether Sot was going to get in and get shredded, or the Oni Warriors were just going to get pushed around by it. It's a different team comp look, but instead of the Olorun gore, to your point, you still have Cupid, you still have Lancelot. Those cripple fields very important. So a lot of it, I think, actually regresses back to the Game 1 conversation. Can Tier push necessary targets into necessary ultimates, or do the Oni Warriors have burst and shred to deal with the Tier? The AMC, they add a bit more.
I think to that point, Merlin is going to be way more effective than the Olorun. Like, Olorun couldn't step forward because he'd just get walled off and killed. He has a very small knockback that means nothing in a lot of the fights that were happening in Game 1. And Sanctified Fields were nice, but again, they just wait it out, or maybe they'd even beads it to get aggressive on you. And then otherwise, your lane is getting a lot of foot traffic. I feel like I like that switch up because it does a lot more damage. But I also, and I think that this is how it's going to be. You know, I'm curious. I guess we'll see it, but I see the Morrigan, and I see the AMC.
Unless she's in stealth.
You're right. Unless she's in stealth, then I don't see her. But I think that this could be Vote playing Morrigan. I think that there was a brief stint where, like, I think Dardez's Morrigan is probably the stronger of the two, hands down.
Yeah.
But I think that there was brief stints of time, not only this season, but in past seasons where mages have been thrown over there. Vote's really been digging the Poseidon. I wouldn't be surprised if that got thrown over there. I don't think it's necessarily got a great matchup into the Cupid, but I think that having that AMC in mid and being in more fights is definitely going to be helpful for him.
I want him to hit me with the player swap.
The player swap? Send Dardez over to
swap.
left?
Yeah, entirely. Put Dardez on Morrigan in duo lane, and then Vote on AMC in mid lane. I don't think that's what we're going to get, but I would like to see.
I don't even know if we're going to get to see the AMC, because it's that weird thing, like, Morrigan into Merlin doesn't necessarily feel like great, but it doesn't feel bad.
Yeah.
Morrigan into Cupid also doesn't feel great, maybe doesn't feel bad, but I don't know that you're getting any pressure. Wherever AMC goes is where that's where you win. Like, that's where your pressure is going to be in lane. And if that's up against a Cupid Khepri, good for you. If it's up against a Merlin, I think good for you as well. Although maybe it comes out, I think no matter where, maybe a little bit of a stalemate.
I wonder if Cupid Khepri can push that pressure better than a Merlin can as far as wave clear, things like that, set up for potential kills.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I like having the AMC on the team for the Oni Warriors. Burst, and I look later in the game because that's where we've gone. If Sot on this tier is going to be diving the AMC, because remember, this is an AMC, a mobile pick that the Warriors have selected. They have chosen to pick this AMC into a Lancelot, into a tier, into hyper dive type of picks. Clearly, the Oni Warriors feel like they've got an answer, whether that's a stinger into damage, whether that's backpedaling a Ymir wall to help out. And there's also going to be some counter dive here. Look at QvoFred on this Mercury to make life difficult for the backline of the Titans.
We'll have to see where this Morrigan and AMC land for the Oni Warriors. Can they bring it back and find their reverse sweep up against the Tartarus Titans to take the third place game? We jump in to game number 3, the third and final of this set between the Tartarus Titans and the Oni Warriors. It's once again, for the final time on this one, J-Mac, Dulcin, and Gormizer. But it will be Dardez taking the AMC mid. And that's actually one thing I was trying to maybe pull up the stats on to kind of see how often these two guys are playing it. Dardez has triple the game time on a Muzen comp than Vote does. So seeing it go over there, maybe not so much a surprise.
Yeah, Dardez may actually be a better AMC than Vote. We talk about
yes, I'd give that to him.
Swap the AMC, because it is still a magey style of pick. Obviously, you have to hit auto attacks, but a lot of abilities that you're throwing in there in the team.
I think I said this yesterday, but like Dardez is legitimately, he's one of the best hunter players in the league, even though he's not. He's not someone who's stuck to a main role.
Vote on Morrigan, right? That ends up being the question. Of course, you give all these SPL players their due credit. And
if you think about it, he could just be Vote on AMC
just
sometimes.
Plays AMC anyway, right?
Occasionally.
I do think that Dardez needed to play this or maybe not even Dardez. What I'll argue is the AMC going mid. I think it does need to go mid. Can wave clear with Paul. I just think the immobility. You're putting so much on Neil if you stick AMC over in the duo lane, because Aror and CycloneSpin. I mean, they can just force pressure in this lane otherwise. Though I mean, you would have wave clear. I think it's a safer option to throw Dardez in mid. Paul doesn't have this hard lockdown that's going to threaten kills super early on in that lane. I think it gives Dardez some time to scale up, and really we're not arguing much because Dardez has been playing the AMC, so we know what you get later on in the game.
Yeah, I really do think that this is I mean, it's just going to be an interesting lineup. I'm honestly surprised to see any amount of clear. going away from him. Then again, I guess Khepri, like, I'm giving maybe too much credit to Khepri in my mind, like almost immediately, where I'm thinking that he's going to help like alleviate any of the pressure. Ymir's got a lot of push, and Vote's still like him. I mean, the Morrigan's still a mage, right? So while Cupid's clear is really good, I guess maybe not too surprising to see it kind of going back and forth between Vote and Neil here. And I just want to know what the transformations are going to be, because I think there's a lot of fun ones that are in the game, but I think my favorite one is potentially that AMC, depending on how these fights go, just having that Stinger, or a Mercury, because of the ultimate that you're going to get from him. But like Stinger, you know, the ability to close the gap if you're a Mercury, all feel really good. Maybe something like SOT to get a Fearless on your squad, and you know, I say this every time, even though it never happens, but the Khepri to have your own res, even though that's such a thin margin to make it happen. And it's such a waste of an ult sometimes to try and do, like, you have to ult to ult and hope that it's all in time. So that probably doesn't feel too great. So I think it's going to be maybe some self-side transformation here for the Warriors, and it's still pretty exciting.
Could also be Lancelot, who would decide to go maybe transform into layers, get some early assassin damage out there. So we'll have to see as the game progresses where Vote puts his priority and kind of puts his stock into these transformation targets. A lot of options available to him, all with maybe mixed and varying levels depending on what he needs for that situation more than anything else. But again, it does feel like the Warriors have built themselves a composition that wants to go late. You have a Mercury, you have a Morrigan. Their big burst damage does come from that late game. So for the Tartarus Titans and for Layers, is his best option, I'll pitch this over to you, Gore, is his best option to just try and sit on Dardez, try and get those beads off this AMC and make him more uncomfortable?
I think that that's something they didn't do last game that they should have been doing, and I wouldn't mind seeing it you know, show up over there. I think Dardez being allowed to free fire at any point or feel safe, get free farm, it needs to be slowed down at the minimum. And so I want to see Layers come up over there. I think Layers actually has plenty of options because, you know, Nika can get away. At this point, you're a King Arthur, probably not going to see Lancelot dive too deep over there. But even over in long, where the Morrigan is, I think you've got some good opportunities against Vote. So I think that Layers on the left side of the map can definitely get a lot more heavy-handed. And I think almost needs to happen, right? It's going to be a slower pace. It's game 3. Money on the line between these two teams. So they definitely want to try and make sure things don't get out of hand. But I think it's not required. I think it's necessary to try and slow Dardez down, because that shred that you're going to get from Stinger, the farm that he's going to have otherwise, and maybe the pressure he can exude on Paul and just in mid is going to be a little, I think, irritating. More than a little irritating. It is just going to straight up be bothersome for the Titans in the late game.
You imagine Layers would be in a spot 2, where QvoFred needs a bit more time. He's going to get Golden Blade. He'll get Rage. But actually, it's a funny balancing point, because we talk so much about late game Mercury and the crit one punch style build. But you need to get active earlier on in the game with that style of build to get those rage stacks going. So it's like, yes, you hit your peak later on, but in order to get there faster, it's not like QvoFred can just sit in the jungle and farm up those stacks in the same way you can on some other items. So yes, later on is where you expect QvoFred to deal immense damage, but don't be surprised if when that rage is there, really farming up to the rage, get some stacks going.
Some early damage on Paul, but it's just the damage from NeilMah more than anything. Dardez not willing to commit his body towards that fight. Does get the beads off the Merlin, which puts some pressure now on towards Paul, as it's his only form of CC immunity to deal with people like QvoFred, like Nika, or even NeilMah, who can throw up another wall just like this. Aror panicking after the Stinger, drops the ultimate on himself very early in the fight. And I don't think Layers wants to fight into 3 people.
No, he'll gallop away. QvoFred charging up the ultimate, nearly sent it towards Layers. And look, I mean, that is simple from Neil. He walks forward, throws up a wall, and gets the beads off of Paul. Dardez still has his beads. I don't want to put, I mean, it's not a must to win this game for the Tartarus Titans to get pressure towards Dardez, but you know, I echo very similar thoughts to what Gore put out. I think you gotta try to slow him down at some point. He's already the 1 level ahead of Paul, been able to farm up nicely. He's gonna have Transcendence soon, so it takes a minute for Dardez to get there. But you could already see how much pressure just a Stinger has early on in the game. Aror forced to use the Scarab's Blessing on himself because Dardez connected with his ultimate. So it's another unique conversation where, yes, later on in the game, Stinger plus burst damage from the abilities. will hit their peak, as any character does when you get more itemization online. Dardez is still pretty strong at this.
I think this is going to be one that overall Dardez, and again, the stronger Dardez or Qvo, the stronger Vote becomes, right? I think that that's going to be the big initiation. Last time it was Rat. I would not be surprised if there's like a couple of initiations that are oriented around a Mercury ult. And getting that Sonic Boom, like the first one, if it connects, if Qvo's able to hit it, that's fine. But in some of those instances late game last time, there were a lot of fights where Qvo just wasn't able to close the gap or had to use it to disengage. So it'd be nice to have a second available for just pure chaos in the fight.
Roar getting low, Scare's Blessing not up, Sonic Boom
like that
from both him and Vote will be good enough to take down the support. First Blood goes to the Oni Warriors and maybe a little more. A CycloneSpin has to retreat towards mid, but Layers has gotten active in the mid lane, finds a pick onto Dardez. The Tartarus Titans able to at least tie up that. But now can Qvo find anything extra? Layers will find the double dash. QvoFred knocks him off the horse, but not much more beyond there. A 1-for-1 trade at the end of the day.
Thank God. All right, so now the box has been ticked. There's a check mark on the page, and I can stop talking about it because Dardez has been jumped on.
But does it count? Because he didn't use his beats.
Yeah,
does it truly count? It still counts. They got the kill.
He still has his beats. Well, look, that just shows you how susceptible he is. I mean, help didn't use the beats, dies. It's freezing a wall.
NeilMah with these walls have been catching Cyclone time and time again, just to be able to lock him down.
What?
And speaking of locking down, a solo kill for Nika under the tier 1 tower against SOT. That is not often that we see a level 9 solo lane solo kill.
It's honestly in the most recent meta, it's not often we get solo lane solo kills,
kill at all.
Period over there, right? And so I think just fun to watch from Nika to be able to get that. And again, impressive and good for them, right? The King Arthur getting ahead feels really good for the Warriors. And you know, you lose Dardez, but like I said earlier, and even though it doesn't maybe take away the checkbox, doesn't burn his beads, is still a little behind Paul, but that means that you're not in the worst case scenario. The problem has been for a lot of Game 1 and Game 2, the Warriors in Game 1 mostly even with the Titans, Game 2 mostly behind the Titans, and so it'd be nice, especially with that kill and maybe getting some pressure over in mid, to see them try and find some sort of gold lead over here. And look, sometimes you just got to do it to him, right? And I think Nika understands this matchup really well. This is what King Arthur brings into it. And there was a lot of healing in the midst of that for Sod as well. So it's not like this was easy. It's not Nika's tower that's dealing a lot of damage. It's just the King Arthur having a lot of prowess, good stuns. And Nika playing him to the best of his capabilities to make that one happen.
What we did miss while that replay went through, double ultimate from Aror and Layers. Layers went in with the initiation on that Grand Joust, got hit by a Stinger, and decided that might be a little too much damage to deal with. And so the Tartarus Titans have to back away and not come up with anything there. Didn't even get beads from Dardez again. This AMC, yes, susceptible to the gank, susceptible to a lot of damage, but hasn't been under threat of too much CC just yet.
Yeah, the next couple of minutes imperative for the Tartarus Titans to continue to make waves. Could be over in duo, even though we don't see much presence over in duo lane. Vote without his beads for the next 45 or so seconds. Gonna continue throwing out Dardez as the option, but it's gotta continue to be Layers, and maybe QvoFred.
Massive combo, and man, another Sonic Boom in there. There is nowhere to go.
Hello.
For the mid 2 of the Tartarus Titans. A perfect execution by Vote, Qvo, and Dardez to swiftly sweep the Tartarus Titans down and be able to pick up 2 more kills.
You know, I don't think that Titans fans are going to think that this is a fun statement for them, but for everybody else, I like seeing 2 Mercuries. That is intense in the mid lane. I mean, the oomph of a single Sonic Boom and how much it can do for a team fight in terms of CC, but also damage, is awesome already. Feels really good for your team. Getting a second punch out of that, in-lane gank, things like that from Vote and Dardez, or sorry, Vote and Qvo, is just impressive.
Is Nika going to do it again? Is Nika about to double solo kill SOT? A lot of sustain, one more shot from Nika, but I think he's just run out of a little too much mana to continue that fight. If not for that Soul Leader pickup again by SOT, he is dead to rights a second time.
Yes.
Yeah, really nice fight there from Nika. And look, SOT picks up the MP5 item, the tier 1, realizing he's going to be receiving a lot of pressure from Nika.
Now Nika might actually be in trouble.
Nika.
Should be,
2,
right?
And dies. Yeah, an easy pickup, a nice rotation, a counter punch there by Layers to punish Nika for sticking around a little too long.
Yeah, look, and I think it's actually pretty important. Now that Sot gets some help from Layers, but you get that MP5 item if you feel like you're under pressure from losing a lot of your blue buffs.
Under pressure.
Nice. That's NeilMah.
You did Ice Baby as well. They took that from Under Pressure, Dave.
They did.
What? Did
The
I say it?
baseline.
No,
You sang Ice Baby.
Yeah.
But you said Under Pressure.
No, he
right,
he
I
doesn't
did.
he doesn't
and I
go
was humming Under Pressure.
Right, I
he
know.
doesn't go by that name anymore. It's just Ice.
Yeah, it's just Ice now. it
Oh,
is.
good point. Yeah, he changed that.
Anyway, SOT. Damn, I've thrown out a lot of anyways over the last couple of days.
You've been with me a lot.
I've been with you a lot, Corey. Man, Sot just can't catch a break. Now it's a solo kill for QvoFred. And hey, Rage completed. Rage stack number 1 online, and that's what I was talking about earlier. Once this Rage is there, it's not like QvoFred sits in the jungle, farms up crit stacks in the jungle, right? He has got to get active, even if your end goal is 30 minutes into the game when you're full build. You have to get active to get there, and that's a really nice start for QvoFred.
Let me pitch something.
Please.
This is completely off topic on here, but let
That's
me.
all right. Look, we can take a breather.
Let me pitch an interesting buff that might make Baba Yaga really, really fun.
Oh, this is all right, Baba Yaga.
So you know, with Baba's passive, she can get her own stacks for her items.
Yeah.
What if allies could also take some of those stacks? So what if you could theoretically stack a Rage by standing near Baba's house a little too much?
But like the house would drain.
Yeah, like it would drain, but to your allies instead of just you.
Like
Does
if
Baba need
you
a buff?
didn't have a
Yeah,
stacking
like if you're
item,
not
it just
stacking
goes to
or
somebody
healing
else.
off it, like you could have your teammate take
I
those
don't hate
stacks.
that, if I'm honest with you.
We're gonna pitch that. It's never gonna go through. That would
Does
be a fun
Baba
pitch.
need a buff though? You could also get BM'd by your team who just steals all your stacks, right? It could be a nerf depending on who you're playing with.
Layers needs some help. He has to gallop away on the joust. No tower for Aror to go back to, and a wall preventing him. That's got to be a maxed out wall by NeilMah. No way that's not at least 3 to 4 points in that ability to try and deal with this Khepri. No, it's all 5 all the way through there, so NeilMah definitely making the most of that ability.
And I always love the mentalities behind all of the what you're maxing on Ymir. Like, do you want more CC from your freeze? Are you looking for more damage and farm from your 2 and the carpet? Or in this case, are you Neil and recognizing that a lot of your advantages are I can block off a path, you don't have a way over this wall, you have to go around it, and giving yourself the max length and capabilities, especially now that you can collapse it, right? Like in the past, it used to be this weird balancing board where it was like, hey, you're either going to throw out a sick wall and it's going to last forever, or you're going to throw out a terrible wall and it's also going to last forever. Now that you can collapse it if you don't connect the way you want it to, it really does enable Neil, I think, to play this and in such a comp that it's going to make it awkward, right? It's very easy to force a Merlin to flicker away, and then everybody else we had kind of highlighted in picks and bans either has to heavy commit or use a relic to get out of there.
All frozen. Neil pushing into the wall and is being melted away by Paul at the least. NeilMah rooted. Will find a path out. Wall should be back up shortly. SOT goes into the backline with the fight, but now that Dardez is there, SOT does not want to continue forward. Lots of peeling between the Oni Warriors teammates to try and get each other out of that fight, but the Tartarus Titans still pressing forward.
Cyclone is here right now. Vote on the rotation over, but looks like the Titans happy with what they've got. Pyromancer still needs a bit more time. Worth rewinding just a second. When we were talking about Baba Yaga, the Oni Warriors did get Gold Fury, and so that's built up their lead
Yeah.
to actually a pretty healthy point. And it's now, when you start to get to these group up team fight style parts of the game, where I'm not looking at Vote, because Vote has told us that he is transforming into Mercury and we're double sonic booming into the backline, or maybe we're stealth stunning CycloneSpin.
Cyclone no Aegis, and as soon as it wears off, Vote will trample him on the horse. And now Paul going in with the fire stance, doesn't want to keep this fight going up. Red buff invade goes successfully, and now even a potential kill onto Aror, because once again a wall is blocked off. Nika has found Paul on the backside of the fight, but SOT finds a double Fearless, and now it's NeilMah who will blink in, find the stun on Aror, who will get the dash away. No further kill, at least for now for the Oni Warriors. They've only found the one pick on the Cyclone.
It is a nice stun on the Sot, but a sonic boom back through. Keeps the fight going. Scarab's blessing needed. And now it's just Layers.
Layers jumps off the horse, doesn't find the kill onto Cuvo, and might not find his way out. At least not alive at the very least. Dardez will be the one to put him in the dirt, and the Oni Warriors can continue this aggression in the enemy jungle.
What an awkward fight that felt like for the Tartarus Titans, where I think NeilMah, maybe my MVP of that fight, even though it's a pretty low kill fight. Remember, Cyclone dies off earlier on, and then Layers ends up dropping here. Neil just cut off so many escape paths with the walls there on the Ymir and forced the defensive ultimates. And Gore, that's something you talked about a lot during picks and bans, was there are certain characters that might faceplant into those walls, and the other characters are going to have to either flicker over or Lawbringer over, and that's what we saw out of Sot and Paul there, where Neil really made those walls work.
And until Aror hits level 12 and I see a shell that gets immediately upgraded, it's going to keep happening, right? Like, Neil just has the control over that. And honestly, it's a shame for the Warriors, because if that fight happens that similar way over on right, they're either able to just rush down a Fire Giant, or at minimum they get the Pyromancer, right? Like, they find a much more large lead and controlling play on the map. I think it's good for the Titans that it didn't end up happening that way, although they do still end up losing a good bit on left. I think that now you have to figure out how you want to fight into it again, because Aror, unfortunately, is too low a level.
Does get away from the freeze, finds the root onto Cuvo, but Cuvo's got the made you look to get the range to take them down. Layers forced to ult out again. And it's not the gold that has been getting out of control for the Oni Warriors, 7,000 up right now, going towards a Fire Giant. But the XP as well, 7K. 3 levels were separating Paul and Dardez too in the jungle. Now just mitigated down to 1. The Oni Warriors have just been controlling not just the actual fights, but the farm across the map.
Think back to Game 4 for the Oni Warriors. This is the way that Game 4 against the Oni Warriors went yesterday, where the Jade Dragons, they were tired of playing around and just took it to the Oni Warriors. And that was like a 17-minute Fire Giant in Game 4 yesterday, and the Oni Warriors revitalized, dust off themselves a bit, and now just running down the Titans as this game is broken a bit wide open, almost fully stacked up on the Rage is QvoFred. Really nice Brawler's Beatstick pickup here from Dardez as well. I think SOT with the Caduceus shield has enough sustain. There's going to be some burst healing from the rest of his teammates as well. Soul Gem, and of course Cupid. I really like that pivot to that for Dardez, but individual picks have just been there so handily for the Oni Warriors this game, which you'd think a Scarab's Blessing would be super helpful for. But the ability to delay out these fights, wait for the Scarab's Blessing, reinitiate, and not die in the meantime has just been so strong. And Gore, we've seen limited effectiveness from this tier. Hasn't quite been doing what we saw in Game 1. The initiation patterns of the Titans just haven't been there.
Good news, though, for the Titans.
Okay.
They finally have a Phantom Shell. So some of these walls,
And
at least one, is going to get mitigated. And they killed off Cuvo. And actually, that's a big pick in mid. Normally, a lot of these fights, especially post-Fire Giant, it's a split of jungler push down tier 2 and mid. Everybody else is on left. We're going to get to the Phoenix. They're going to get to the Phoenix. We'll split up the other team. That kill going towards the Titans maybe doesn't reset this FG as a whole. I still think that the Titans, or that the Warriors have plenty of capabilities to burn down pretty much all of the towers, but it does stop a Phoenix.
Layers does jump over the wall, but that's as far as he's gonna go. As soon as he lands down in, it's just too much damage from the Oni Warriors. NeilMah, once again, a perfect wall to block off the ultimate of Layers and really show the punishment that this Ymir has over half of the composition that the Tartarus Titans have drafted. Even losing QvoFred, the Oni Warriors can still push up this mid-tier too.
Something, Ymir feels good into Lancelot, something, right? I mean, it's exactly what you say, J-Mac, and what we talked about during picks and bans. And that's a great magnifying glass moment where you can theorize all these counterplay options and things like that, but a good old face plant into a wall is about as literal as it gets in this case. I think this is, I want to zoom out and just talk about the Oni Warriors in general now for a second, because this game, pretty handedly in favor of the Onis. I mean, the Titans, I mean, you know, you scale up, I guess, if you're Merlin and Cupid, but you're going up against Dardez, Fold. We're going to have 2 Mercuries that are one-punching the backline. I think the Oni Warriors should be in a really good spot to close out this game. And what a way to end this phase for the Oni Warriors, because I think if you're looking at social media, Reddit, whatever it may be, throughout the phase, we're able to condense that into just general feelings for the Oni Warriors. This team has caught a lot of flack throughout a good bit of the phase, and for good reason, right? I mean, they have not been the picture of consistency. They have dropped a lot of sets that you would argue they should have won. They have not looked like themselves at points. But to be able to be, you know, 3rd place in the SPL at points throughout the phase, then you're on like a 5-set loss streak, and people are talking about something's got to change. And now you're on the verge of ending SPL Masters, or SMITE Summer Masters in 3rd, right? I mean, 3rd best team in the league.
Yeah.
I think it's a great look for this Oni Warrior squad. You know, you're competitive against the Dragons and all but that final game, a couple games away, some games you feel like you dropped from going to the finals. I think Oni Warriors and their fans should be excited about the last third of the year for this Oni Warriors team if we can avoid games like Game 4 against the Dragons. And I'm not even saying games like this against the Titans, because this doesn't happen super often, but play a consistent brand of SMITE. I think the opportunity is there for the Oni Warriors to make some eyebrows raise later on this year.
I think that they've been getting more consistent, right? Like, it hadn't been enough that they found success. In fact, that at the end of phase 2, even they were saying, or they were like, yeah, something's wrong, man. Like,
right.
and you know, to a lot of it was like, yeah, it's partially like play. You know, it feels like that something's off, and just trying to figure out what it is. And being able to get back in, because you know we see these guys outside a game all the time, and every team has like a good vibe to them. The Warriors and maybe the Bolts might be the ones that feel like the most just friendship.
Sonic Boom used, SOT caught out of the Lawbringer with 3 surrounding. Not a chance that SOT makes it out. It's just a matter of who gets the kill. QvoFred will punch him down. The Oni Warriors now stamp their 11th kill for their name. Fire Giant comes up in just a moment. And all the Warriors have already surrounded through there. Not a single member of the Tartarus Titans around to try and stop this one.
Yeah.
And this one should go over to the team. And I think to maybe echo some of the sentiments, I mean, one of the things that, you know, we even talked about at the start of the year, you know, the Oni Warriors had to go through that relegation process in the SPL qualifiers.
Yeah.
And it wasn't exactly the cleanest performance by them to get in. So it became a question of, is this Oni Warriors team even going to stack up this year? Or are they going to be able to kind of face off against the talent that's erupted around? But they end up getting 3rd, 4th place in phase 1, have an unfortunate fallout at Masters, start going again on their rise in phase 2, have a little bit of a fallout. So I'll echo some of that with you there, Dave, is that if you're an Oni Warriors player and an Oni Warriors fan out there, you got to be proud of the change-ups this team has made in this event.
I wonder, here's what I do wonder, because think back to like all the NeilMah teams that we've talked about in winning worlds, where they haven't been the regular season powerhouses, but they have found a way to get it done at tournament events. I'm getting early like vibes from this squad. If you look towards phase 3 and worlds, that's the kind of team that I feel like the Oni Warriors are, where they're going to win some big sets throughout the phase. They're not going to be able to go undefeated and near undefeated like the Kings have, but they are a team that is capable of putting together just these incredible 4, 5, 6 set long performances when they need them to step up.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's always that unknown. It's any given Sunday dialed up to 11 for the Oni Warriors, it feels like. And you'd love to cleanly finish out Game 3. We're praising them, but you can't afford to step too far forward. This is something that the Oni Warriors have not been immune to, is a little NeilMah overextension. I mean, I'm not hitting the alarm bells just yet. Only 30 seconds and way longer than that on this Fire Giant buff, but doesn't feel great for our timing as we're hyping them up. Right, NeilMah drops his Fire Giant.
And that's like the good news of the Titans composition here, and it's not just the Emperor's Armor, which I have to say shout outs to Doug for highlighting that for Aror. So enhancing these Phoenixes a little bit to make it harder to go into. A little bit of the it's not an EFG playing into their favor. But also Merlin is going to do a lot of damage shred at this point and have a lot of wide abilities for defense. So around these Phoenixes, when Paul's alive, that feels like it's going to be solid. And I think there's a lot of wiggle room for the Titans, specifically for their engage. I mean, we talked about it earlier. Satsu 3-1 has not really done anything this game. But I think that if you can get a good like Blink or Lawbringer in and then Fearless back into a Phoenix, that's a potential pick that could start turning the tides of things. Now, granted,
that's got to happen in like 8 times. They are 14,000 gold down.
But look at the map, right? I mean, you've got 2 tier 2s left on the
like
other side.
8 times.
They've got to, if they get it once, they get a Phoenix.
Sure. No,
if
you're
they
right.
get it twice, then they can get like a Fire Giant. I think that there's definitely something like it's not a hey, you make this play and win. It's hey, you make this play and you're not losing as hard anymore.
Yeah,
I don't think you
that's
make
true.
up for the gold, but you can at least change the map state.
That's true. Map state, especially when you get later on in the game, is ultimately what becomes important.
Oh, there's a tier 1 in mid still. I missed that.
Especially with how the last couple of games have ended, where the team who's been handedly behind has ended up winning. So yes, I mean, the longer you go, the death timers get longer, and there is burst potential for the Titans. But
you know what?
the gold lead's so strong now. I'm not nervous yet that we've hyped up the Oni Warriors too early, but if it happens another couple of times, we're in the danger zone.
The furthest behind that a team has won is 20,000 gold. So the Titans technically still have some wiggle room to work with.
Yeah,
they got them right where
To
they
be
want them, baby.
fair-
On the ropes.
To be fair, that was a NeilMah team 20,000 gold down instead of
Don't
now
say that part.
20,000 gold up. And NeilMah and the rest of the Oni Warriors are starting their siege once more on the left side. Some help from the Trebuchet, and some help from some big crit damage. Well, at least force one out. Nika goes to the backline. Aror caught out. And the Emperor's armor is now gone. Vote can dive to the backline on the Lancelot. Layers nowhere to go. Paul does only have his Aegis left. Cyclone finds a nice Fields of Love to at least get the Oni Warriors out of the backline. But the Phoenix no longer standing. The Oni Warriors find 2, and they find the burn.
Yeah, that's far from squeaky clean for the Oni Warriors, but that's the gold lead speaking to you there through that fight. I mean, if this is any closer, that's actually not a bad look at a defense from the Titans. Lots of low health bars on the Oni Warriors, but just so far ahead. And that allows you to play a bit more recklessly if you're the Oni Warriors. QvoFred, 1 or 2 taps layers there in the back.
Yeah.
Aror, Scarab's Blessing, dies with him, doesn't have enough time to even use it. And then Vote actually used the Lancelot. I thought we would see the double Sonic Boom to initiate there to really follow up, but works out either way. You drop the most important Phoenix and go into this next Fire Giant in 15.
I almost think that if they had that Fire Giant buff still and that Phoenix falls faster, then maybe Vote does go for a Sonic Boom, right? Because it's the difference of, we have to, we can't get into the base without killing this off, and it takes just a little too long without the Fire Giant buff. Even with the Fire Giant, probably was an awkward amount of time. But if you get rid of that, and it's hey, now it's just, can we kill them fast? Then yeah, you're going Mercury, and you're trying to close onto anybody. If it's Paul or Cyclone, you're looking for that gap.
Fire Giant goes to the Oni Warriors. No one on the Titans are in the same area at all to try and stop this. It's a push up to the left Phoenix.
No way.
CycloneSpin and SOT will go back. But will they get back in time? It's only Aror to defend against 4. Trebuchet is there, but Trebuchet is not going to help Aror much. His bubble is gone. His ultimate is gone. And so is the Phoenix. It has been taken out. Aror will only live maybe for a moment longer as the Sonic Boom comes through by QvoFred. A double kill for the jungler of the Oni Warriors. Now 3 left to defend. And a bead's gone from SOT. Nika to the back line to hold back Paul and Cyclone. And the Warriors go to the mid-Phoenix.
Something Ymir, something good against Khepri, right? I mean, there are face plants into the wall. This has been clinical from the Oni Warriors. They get QvoFred started early. The moment that rage is completed, the stack started building. The 1-2 punch has just been too strong.
Joust in by Vote. A push of Vote into the fountain could spell disaster. But with the Titans so low, the Oni Warriors so healthy, they're poised to take game number 3. Paul zoned away from the damage. Nika being pushed back against the wall. But the Oni Warriors, at the end of it all, 3 games in, they will take the set and be your 3rd place team in SMITE Summer Masters.
So I think there's a lot that I want to take away, and we'll have plenty of time on this post-game desk to look at for both of these teams. But to really sink our teeth into game 3 here, we effectively stop having to break this down 10 minutes ago because the moment QvoFred wants to start fighting more, getting those stacks built up, that's when QvoFred starts doing that. The double transformation is really what changes this. Sonic Boom, double backline dive was simply too strong from the Oni Warriors this game. And so many instances of Ymir walls stifling any type of disengage, anything that the Titans wanted to do in or out, I think was just a really nice game from Neil. A near spotless game from Neil, minus 1 slight overstay over on the left side of the map. Luckily, when you're that far ahead, you're allowed to do that. I think everything just worked right for the Warriors here.
And the way that they played it again, from the get-go, that entire game felt like it was just a constant push up against what the Titans wanted to try and do. And to the extent where it's always really interesting to see it because you get something as simple as a solo kill for Nika which I say as simple as it feels like it's impossible to
Forgot
do
that happens.
over there. But that gets you a good solid lead. You know, Dardez at one point actually did fall behind, but as you mentioned, when you have two sonic booms and you get that much CC, that much dive, that much capability of just forcing a fight to happen right there, it becomes very easy to bring the damage right onto their doorstep. And so I think all of that really just kind of blends together to make it just almost too much to handle.
Gore, have you seen The Boys?
Yes.
J-Mac, have you seen The Boys?
I
No, you
have
haven't
not.
seen The Boys.
Oh, hey, guess what? If
with
you're a
your
Prime sub,
Yeah, there you go.
Your Prime
Perfect.
membership, you get to watch The Boys.
No, it's what you snap.
This reminded me of like A-Train from The Boys, like
in
just,
the first episode, right?
Right, just sprinting on through.
No spoilers for
Yeah,
you,
no
J-Mac.
spoilers.
Oh, yeah.
Literally watch the first 10 minutes and you will no longer be spoiled.
Yeah.
Really an awesome performance from the Oni Warriors.
Oh, I thought
here.
you were going to say from A-Train. I was going to say, yeah.
Look, this right here, A-Train. You need the train horn flying through. I think we already talked a good bit about the Oni Warriors and the give and take that this team has. I'm sure that their fans wished that they weren't put through the ups and downs, the good and the bad, but that's all part of being a team in a league as competitive as this. And so I think the Oni Warriors proved to us here this weekend that they are able to compete with the best teams in this league. Needless to say, right? I mean, they showed us that during Phase 2, of course, but later on this year, starting to talk Worlds, you're starting to talk about tournament runs. This team can do it. Because look at how different the finals could look if a couple different games go a couple different ways.
Yeah.
Titans one game away from being in the finals over the Camelot Kings. Oni Warriors, really bad Game 4, but looked great in Game 1 against the Dragons. A dropped
Game
ball
3.
there. Game 3 looked good, bit of a drop ball there. So, I mean, you could look so different in these grand finals. All of these top 4 teams, I think regardless of how things shake out, Titans won't be happy with 4th place because they have their eyes on finals, right? This is a team that expects themselves to go to finals. And so I think if you're the Titans, their players, their fans, Oni Warriors, their players, their fans, even with a 3rd, 4th place finish, you want to be in the finals, of course. But I think those teams proved to us this weekend that looking at Phase 3 and looking at Worlds providing nothing absurd changes with these squads, anything can happen. They can make a run and compete with any of these top teams. They are the top teams. And a great look for the Oni Warriors to end their phase with a 3rd place.
And I think for these teams, maybe at least a highlight for a lot of the fans out there for these players is there's going to be quite a bit of downtime between now and Phase 3. I mean, there is multiple weeks of downtime for these teams to start going back, doing some VOD review, really start to kind of sink their teeth into a lot of what happened during this event. We're going to see meta shift-ups between now and even the next time that we see these teams. So who knows what anybody is going to look like at the end. But one thing we do know is at least how the bracket looks moving up into our final match with the Tartarus Titans dropping down 1-2 to the Oni Warriors. The Oni Warriors will be your 3rd place team in SMITE Summer Masters, the Tartarus Titans in 4th, which means that we are now down to our grand finals, our final set of the day, of the event, and of Phase 2. It will be the Camelot Kings and the Jade Dragons to round out our day, Gore.
Yeah, and I mean, look, this is a very important matchup, I think, in my eyes. Like, being able to come in, the difference, first off, in pricing between 1st and 2nd is going to be very hefty, but also getting a chance, like, you know, if you're the Kings here, we've been talking about it a little bit, but finally being able to say, like, look, we've won a tournament, right? We finally got one of them under our belts. We're not just this regular season team. Or if you're the Dragons, being able to kind of prove and showcase, although I would argue that they've already done so, that you dropped, you know, a world champion MVP jungler off your team, and it's done nothing but maybe accelerate where you are.
I agree. Things to prove for both of these two teams, Camelot Kings and Jade Dragons. And also to see if Variety's a man of his word. If they win, is he going straight to Vegas,
And
putting it all
put
in
it all
black,
on
and see if he can double his winnings? I think lots to look forward to in our grand finals.
You're not going to want to miss out on the grand finals. Those are going to be coming up after this short break, so make sure you go to the restroom now, get your snacks, eat some lunch, whatever it may be, because the grand finals of SMITE Summer Masters kicks off in just a few minutes.